Barbara County Planning Commission meeting of the 12th of December, 2007. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Good morning, Ms. Soplin. Will you please call the roll and give the TV coverage announcement?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County Santa Barbara Television CSB TV Channel 20 at 9 o'clock a.m. in the South Coast, Lompoc, San Ynez Valley, Santa Maria, and Orchid areas. Rebroadcasts of the Planning Commission hearings are on Fridays at 5 o'clock p.m. on CSB TV Channel 20. And for the roll call, Commissioner Blau?
Here.
Commissioner Jackson?
Here.
Commissioner Valencia?
Here.
Commissioner Cooney?
Here.
And for the record, Commissioner Brown is going to be absent today.
Thank you, Ms. Soplin. Good morning, Ms. Black. You have the agenda status report.
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. This morning we have 2 items on your agenda, a consent item and one regular item. We're ready to move forward on both of those items, but we do have some procedural issues we'll need to discuss in item number 1 when we get to that.
And the projection report.
Yes. This is our last meeting of 2007. Looking forward to 2008. We did look into the issues that the Planning Commission had with respect to the January 2nd agenda. And as you can see, we've got agendas full, I think, into pretty much into February. We did need to conduct a briefing for the Planning Commission on the Santa Barbara Ranch EIR, as we discussed at our last meeting or two. So we have put that on your January 2nd agenda. We also looked into moving the conceptual review for the Hunter La Prisma Resort and found that the January 9th meeting actually would work, I think, better for everybody involved, given that we're having a meeting up here. So we are proposing to keep the January 2nd date. I probably will add an item related to process improvement to that agenda for your consideration as well. But I think we have enough business to have a meeting that day. January 9th, as you can see, is in Santa Maria, and that is a closed agenda already. There are a number of items on that date. January 10th, we had reserved for the Trankian Ridge matter. That matter is not going to be ready for the Planning Commission's review on January 10th, so you can take that off your calendar. And I'll talk about another date in a moment. January 23rd will be a meeting in Santa Barbara, and that agenda is also closed. We have a briefing and a workshop on that day, as well as 2 project items. The briefing is on greenhouse gas emissions, the workshop on affordable housing, and then 2 projects. February 6th is also in Santa Barbara and is also closed, with 2 projects. One, the continued Paradise Ivy project in Isla Vista, and then the community plan boundaries for Goleta and the land use work program. February 13th, we're back in Santa Maria. That agenda is getting close to being full, but not quite full yet. There's 3 permit items on that day. We're suggesting February 21st as a potential date for the Trankian Ridge hearing. I don't know if that's a possibility for the Commission. That's on a Thursday. But if you could check your calendars and maybe let me know before you leave today, that'd be really helpful. Oh, and I missed February 8th. We do have set for our retreat. That's a Friday, and I think we had agreed to meet at 10. We haven't finalized the location yet. It'll be somewhere in the Santa Ynez Valley, and plan to go through lunch and into the early afternoon. And then February 27th is again in Santa Barbara, and that agenda is almost full as well. So you've got a lot of work coming your way, and we'll let you know if we have permit items that require your review. We may, and require a special hearing, or we may need to move some of the briefings around a bit to accommodate permit items, which are obviously our priority.
Thank you, Ms. Black. Commissioner Jackson has a question.
Yeah. With regard to projection for the 21st of February, would that be a 9 to whenever proposition, or what time were you thinking of?
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Jackson, thank you for the question. We typically start special hearings at 9 a.m., and I would expect that to be in Santa Maria. I don't know how long the item will take. That's why we start at 9.
Commissioner Valencia?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Black, is the CEQA training cycle still on the board someplace?
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Valencia, yes, I haven't got it on the projection report yet because as you can see, the agendas are getting quite full, and so I'm trying to figure out kind of how to weave it in.
Commissioner Blau?
Yeah, I'm just, I'm curious about the Santa Barbara Ranch meeting for the 2nd of January. Do they actually have a proposed project that we can look at and 'cause I haven't seen that yet. I mean, after the last hearing, we don't know how many units, we don't know where they are. I'm just concerned, is that process going to be complete by the 2nd of January?
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Blau, we definitely have a project proposal and an alternative that the applicant has asked us to look at. We're in the second revised draft EIR. I conducted an environmental hearing on Monday, and so our intent would be to bring the project to the commission to review the environmental document, not for you to take any formal action, but to get you up to speed on the project and the impacts.
With regard to Santa Barbara Ranch, Ms. Black, do we have an overall time frame within which we need to operate for a review of that project? I know there was an agreement to that effect with the developer at one time, but it seems the time limits in that document have long since passed.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, the MOU prescribed deadlines related to the environmental document preparation and to the hearing process before your Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. You're correct in that we have not complied with the timelines in the MOU with respect to the environmental document, and that was with the blessing of the applicant, so they can extend those timelines because we had to prepare a revised draft EIR, which required them to do a substantial amount of work. We mutually agreed to that. When we get to the Planning Commission, the MOU indicates that the Planning Commission has 2 months to review the project. So essentially, as many hearings as we want to conduct within a 2-month period is what is prescribed for in the MOU. And if the applicant agrees to a longer period of time, then he can. But I think the sense I'm getting from the applicant on this project is that they'd like to get back on track with the MOU once we have a proposed final EIR. And that's why we're proposing to come to you January 2nd to start to get this commission really familiar with the project and the environmental document.
Which would be in advance of the final
Yes.
EIR.
Yes, in fact, it'll be still during the public review period. We have extended that review period to January 23rd. So it'll be during that period. This hearing is really for the commission to become familiar with the project. I suspect that some people will come and testify to the commission or will want to testify before the commission. We expect this project to be before you for a decision or recommendation to the board in the spring, probably late spring.
All right, thank you very much. That's helpful. That's certainly going to take some time in 2008. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? It appears not, so we're able to move then to public comment. This is the opportunity afforded the public to comment on matters not on today's agenda. I don't believe we have any speaker slips. Commissioner Blau. Is there anyone who is here to speak generally, Commissioner Blau?
Maybe I should have brought this up earlier when we were still discussing the,
Couple didn't make it up.
oh, sorry. The agenda here. I know Mr. Fields was concerned about whether he should comment on this now at the public hearing process or wait until we see the item, but there seems to be some concern as to whether or not we have the ability to take up item 2 today. So maybe we should discuss that first as part of the calendar, and then that will tell you whether or not I think you have a public speaker or not. And the concern is we're doing a general plan amendment that's in the San Ynez Community Plan. I think the issue is this a public benefit or not? I'm not sure what the discussion is, but maybe we should discuss that item, whether it should be on the agenda today or not.
Well, Commissioner Blau, I've discussed this with Ms. Black. I think we all agree it's appropriately on the agenda. Now, what the commission can do with it is to be discussed within the context of the project. But certainly, one of the aspects would be to give anyone who's here to speak about the project an opportunity to do so during the course of a hearing. So I don't think there's any doubt, Ms. Black, that we will hold a hearing. The question is, are we in a position to take the action recommended by staff?
That's fine. I'm concerned as to whether or not, maybe Mr. Fields would like to make a public comment now beforehand, or maybe he wants to wait. I'm not sure what he wants to do. He was asking me that question.
Well,
Mr. Chair, my recommendation would be if his comment relates to item number 1 on the project stage stop plaza, that he make it when we take that item up. But I don't know if it is or not. Is it?
all right.
No, it isn't. Well,
I
if
can
it's,
say
if
that-
it's a general public comment, then we should take it during public comment.
Well, I don't know where this fits.
Mr. Fields, sorry. Yeah, come on up here. We'll err on the side of too much comment rather than too little. So
Well, you got the right guy.
you're welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I'm not sure exactly where this does fit, so I appreciate the opportunity to go first. My understanding of the policies that is in place with regard to the San Ynez Valley Community Plan, and as reaffirmed by this commission on November 16th, just a couple of weeks ago, is that applications like this will not be processed by the county. And so I believe that you holding a hearing on it is processing by the county and is therefore not permitted by the policy. If I may ask a very fair question that are not in my written comments. So by the way, let me give you copies here. I think, Mr. Chairman, I think the other commissioners. Mr. Sarloos, the applicant, asked me a very fair question, which is what is my goal here? And it's not in the written document, but I want to make it clear that my goal is the integrity of the San Ynez Valley Community Plan and the planning process. My comments are not about the project, except I'll say as an aside that I kind of like it. The comments are about the process. Under the Board of Supervisors' adopted policy, which is attached to this memo, and affirmed after 3 lengthy Planning Commission hearings just in the last month, I believe the application for this project should not have been accepted for processing by P&D a year or so ago when it was accepted. It should not be processed to this point, and there's no policy basis for the Planning Commission to hear this today. The problem starts with the uncontested fact that this project is inconsistent with the current zoning on the site, and therefore requires either adoption of the San Ynez Valley Community Plan, which it would be consistent with, a rezone or a general plan amendment to get it to C2. Now, the county policy says very clearly that no general plan amendments or rezones shall be processed while the community plan is in process, unless it represents a rare case of significant community benefit. Now, at the recent Planning Commission hearings, the definition of this phrase was discussed at some length, and it may be arguable whether or not this project fits that exception and the intent of that exception. But it's not arguable that that determination has not yet been made. And the policy says that that determination is made by the Planning Commission, not by the applicant, not by P&D. And that, of course, would be at a Brown Act noticed public hearing on that subject. So that hasn't happened. So interestingly, at the Planning Commission hearings over the last month or so, the staff recommendation would not have allowed this to be processed, and none of the permutations that you discussed, which did not get commission support or public support, none of them would have allowed this to be processed, because the rezone would not have been consistent. It would have been consistent with the community plan, as that phrase was used, but it was the exception that it was the C2 mixed use in Santa Ynez, a zoning district which does not exist, and therefore they could not process an application to that. And Mr. Cooney, you asked staff after the public comment what would happen if an application like that came in, and their response was that they could not process the application. So that's out. The second option here is to rezone this to C2, which is not consistent with the plan. So the policy says that's out. The only remaining option is the significant public benefit, which I repeat has not been determined. Now, my point here is, the reason I'm here is, if this is processed any further, again, I don't think it should have come as far as it did, and if it is determined by you to recommend to the board and the board to throw out the policy, or if this is allowed to slide through as an exception, there is no policy regarding general plan amendments and rezones in the Santa Ynez Valley. It's a commercial project, private commercial project. If it can be processed, why can't any other commercial project, or residential for that matter? And so I believe that this is seriously undermines the integrity of the planning process, violates the explicit board policy, and I speak for myself and many members, citizens and groups in the valley, as you heard during those 3 hearings. We want this community plan finished. We want the pace picked up. The year and a half that's been lost here was because the county did not process the plan. It's not the community's fault. And we believe that this breaks the policy and breaks the plan. So I would ask you to not even hear this today. And there are, if you have another minute, I can offer the 3 suggestions that I think are available to the applicant.
I think having heard your comments to date, they're going to be germane when we call the item and begin the hearing, notwithstanding your concerns about starting that process. It's my intent, at least, to call the matter and to discuss these issues as part of the project. So you'll have another chance to speak on it.
Okay, I may pass because I kind of got it all said. There are options for the applicant, however.
Thanks.
Thank you
Mr.
very much.
Anyone else? It doesn't appear so. We don't have speaker slips, so we'll move to our regular agenda. First, the administrative portion of the agenda. Do we have Planning Commissioner informational reports from any of us this morning? It doesn't appear so. I'll ask Ms. Black if there are any planning or development divisional briefings.
Mr. Chair, we don't have any briefings this morning.
Thank you, Ms. Black. Then, Commissioners, we'll take a look at our minutes of the hearing of November 28th, our last hearing. Are there changes, corrections, or a motion in that regard?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I will second that motion.
The motion's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the 28th. Is there discussion? I would just add that I have, and I told Ms. Oplin I would let her know in advance, but I didn't have a chance to do that, of some typographical corrections, a couple of words missing, but I don't think anything we need to take the Planning Commission's time with. So I'll communicate those to her in the redraft. But subject to those minor changes, are we ready to vote on the motion? All right, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed or abstentions? So that motion passes 4-0, Ms. Oplin. Next is the director's report. And is Mr. Baker with us today, Ms. Black?
Your chair.
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, he is.
We can hear you, Mr. Baker. There you are. Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Just 3 brief items to report on. Yesterday at the board meeting, the board approved a report on changes to our CEQA guidelines for EIR preparation items in the future. These are changes that we need to make to ensure we have a pristine EIR process. If you need more detail, Diane can give that to you. Second, we had a report on the agenda from the Ag Commissioner and myself with regard to the 6-month review of the consolidation of agricultural planning into the Planning and Development Department. And I would just say that the bottom line of that report was that operationally it is working very well. The coordination between the Ag Commissioner's Office and Planning and Development has improved dramatically, I think, with some very good efforts on the part of the agricultural planner that has been working with us. And I'm in the process of selecting a second agricultural planner that will be primarily addressing a lot of the policy issues that were raised by one of the AAC members yesterday at the board meeting. The third announcement is to tell you that due to some labor contracts that have just been recently negotiated, the county is not going to be open on December 24th or December 31st this year, and so I wanted to take this opportunity to use this forum to announce that so that the public will hear it. We'll be putting signs up at any one of our public counters, but I just wanted to also alert you that we are going to be closed on the 24th and the 31st this year. That's my report for today.
Any questions of Mr. Baker? I don't see any, Mr. Baker. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, I did have one, Mr. Baker. I didn't have a chance to watch the supervisors meeting yesterday, but I understand there was discussion of the recent spill at one of the Greca Energy facilities that was discussed in the context of public comment at the board. Is there another hearing set to review that issue
Yes, Mr. Chair, it is set for January 15th.
before the board?
Before the board, that's correct. There will be an agenda item and a report on that date.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome.
We next have our consent agenda. We might as well take this up. We have one item on the agenda, which is a request of Mr. Havlick of Public Works with regard to Tivola Street in the Sandy Nez area. Commissioner Blau.
I'm just going to make a motion to approve the consent item.
We have to read it in the record.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Hold it 1 second. Ms. Open.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The following is the hearing on the request of Jeff Havlick, Public Works Department, to consider case number 07-GOV-15, application filed on November 14, 2007, for a determination that the vacation of an unused county right-of-way is consistent with the County of Santa Barbara Comprehensive Plan pursuant to Government Code Section 65402.
All right, Commissioners, first disclose, if you will, any communications or site visits on this matter. Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, just because Tivola has a lot of beginnings and ends, I went over the weekend just to verify what section we're talking about.
And I did drive by this morning to look at the property in question. All right. Commissioner Blau is ready to move. Do we want any staff information on this matter? Mr. Havlick? Is he here? Okay.
Yes, Chair, I'm here.
Okay, I did have one quick question. Is this the first instance where there has been a request to purchase property not used by the county on this particular road?
It's the first one in my career on Tivola Street, yes.
And as I understand it, the property in question is part of the right-of-way, but is not used. It's not actually paved, but it's an unpaved shoulder to the road.
That is correct.
Is there any reason why neighboring owners on either side of this property or further down the road wouldn't be in a position to request the same consideration of the county?
There's no reason. They are also welcome to apply for this same action.
Okay. Commissioner Jackson?
Was there consideration paid on this transaction? Was this a transaction from their standpoint?
There will be consideration. I come to you first, to y'all, and then after your action, we will appraise the property, figure out what it's worth, and then take it up to the Board of Supervisors, who then would accept or reject the purchase price and execute the correct document, quitclaim deed, probably in this case.
All right. Commissioner Blau?
I'll move for approval of the consent items.
I will second.
Any further discussion? This specifically is to transmit the consistency report required by 65402 to the Board of Supervisors, and to find that the road vacation portion of this Tivoli Street is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Ms. Opelin, if you'll call the roll.
Commissioner Blau?
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson?
Yes.
Commissioner Valencia?
Aye.
Commissioner Cooney?
Aye.
Vote carries 4-0.
All right, thank you very much. So we're ready to move to the primary focus of the day, which is item 1 on our agenda, the Stage Stop Plaza project, and we'll take that up in 5 minutes after staff has a chance to set up. Planning Commission meeting of the 12th of December, 2007. And we're at item 1 on the agenda. Ms. Opelin, please read that into the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The following is the hearing on the request of Mr. Barry Burkus, agent for Mr. Harvey Serlus, owner, to consider the following. A 07 GPA 10 application filed on November 20th, 2007. B 07 RZN 19 application filed on November 20th, 2007. C 06 DVP 18 application filed on November 6, 2006. D 06 TRM 6 application filed on November 6, 2006. E 06 CUP 68 application filed on November 6, 2006. F 07 CUP 86 application filed on November 20th, 2007, and to approve the negative declaration 07 NGD 36 pursuant to the state guidelines for implementation of CEQA.
Thank you, Ms. Opelin. Commissioners, declarations. Commissioner Blau?
Yeah, I made a site visit to the property, and then I had a question on the what you just read, and I think it's the 06 TRM. I'm not sure how you divide 3.1 acres into a 3.1 acre lot. I'm not sure about that, that you just read in.
Mr. Chair, it's my understanding that they're processing a condominium map with this to allow the sales of the residential units, but they would be on a one-lot subdivision.
Commissioner Jackson?
Yes. I had an ex parte conversation with applicant's representative, Mr. Burkus, briefly at a Christmas party, just to discuss whether or not we were aware of what was coming, et cetera. On December 4th, I met with the applicant on another matter with representatives from planning, comp planning, Supervisor Firestone's office, and myself. At the end of that discussion, the project discussion turned to Stage Stop briefly for a conceptual discussion. Again, was I aware and what was coming forward? I believe that what was discussed in that meeting will be brought forward at another time or before the commission. There was nothing there other than dates and times, et cetera.
Thank you. Commissioner Valencia?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I visited the site, and about four years ago, someplace in that area, I was involved in a decision on this property to approve a hotel, I believe, for Fess Parker. And it was a very controversial item, but it was approved, so just like to disclose that part. I don't know what the status of that is.
Yes, and I also visited the site this morning. Of course, I've driven by it every 2 weeks for 4 years, but hadn't really looked at it until this morning. I had no ex parte communications. Ms. Black, before we turn to staff, an issue was raised by Mr. Field regarding the processing of this project, and I know this has been raised by a number of individuals in advance of the meeting. So perhaps you can set the stage here in terms of what we can and can't do with today's hearing.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Actually, there are two issues, and I'll address that one first, and then we'll discuss the tribal consultation issue. First of all, with respect to the general plan amendment, this application does not rely on a change to a general plan amendment or zone district that is being created as part of the San Ynez Community Plan. So I just wanted to make that clear. However, half of the project site is proposed to be rezoned and redesignated to C2 from highway commercial. Correct. This application has been with the department for some time, and I don't think it's gotten before the commission in precisely the correct way. I do think there are actions the commission could take today, if you chose to enable the project to continue to be processed. But I do believe that we should have brought this matter to the commission for consideration of a public benefit before today. So I guess my recommendation to the commission at this point is you may want to consider whether or not you believe this project provides a public benefit, and I think there is a fair amount of evidence in the record that speaks to that issue before you take up the substance of the project, because that is really the only way under the board's policy that the project can move forward right now. The project was initially submitted in a little different form. It had a larger public component to it. I think that sort of carried my staff in moving the project forward, and I apologize that it's been a bit of a confused process, but I do think it is correctable if the commission feels that you can make a finding that processing is justified because there's a public benefit. And I'd point to a number of public letters, but also a letter in your packet from DUDEC to Mr. Burkus, and it indicates the provision of public restrooms, public parking, et cetera, as points of public benefit that the commission may want to consider. Do you want me to move to the second issue, or do you have questions about that?
I just had a procedural question about that. So, do we need to make a motion that we've determined that it's a public benefit, or do we need something in the record that does that? I'm not sure what the procedure is.
It's, Mr. Chair and members of the commission, it's not an ordinance issue. It's really an articulated policy of the board through adoption. So I think it would be helpful to have some indication from the commission that that's why you are moving forward, and some articulation. I don't know if a formal motion is required. I'll defer to county council.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Blau, members of the commission, this is a board policy. I think it's preferable for you to make a motion so that it's clear what action you're taking. I don't know that it's required, because you are going to be articulating the reasons why you are moving forward if you decide to move forward on a significant community benefit issue.
And I asked that question not just for this issue, but it seems to me if we're going to have other projects that may or may not come before us, you would need to make an inquiry, we would make a motion, we'd make a determination, we'd have it in the record. So I think when it comes time, I think I'm inclined to make a motion and so that we have it in the record, and then we have a procedure for the future as well.
Right. Mr. Chair and Commissioner Blau, what we would, had we brought this forward to you before today, before we were recommending a particular action, we would have actually articulated findings. We'd have had a recommendation as to whether or not you make a finding of substantial benefit, and we would have had findings for you. So I think it would be appropriate to articulate what your basis would be, one way or the other, and put that in a motion.
In terms of the timing of such a motion, though, isn't it more appropriate to base that, in part at least, on testimony that we'll hear from staff and from the community as to the potential benefit, certainly from the applicant? All we have is a staff report at this time on which to make that decision, and for me at least, I'd appreciate the additional support before making a threshold determination. So I guess what we're talking about is the timing of the motion. I don't have any doubt that that's something we need to do, and whether we're in a position to go beyond that today is certainly questionable. Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, maybe you've answered this, but I need it a little more directly. A process issue has been raised by a member of the public, which purports that there is a structured response, being that it's announced or agendized, et cetera, and you follow that process. Before we get off of that, I need to know either the member of the public is wrong or he's right, because he asserted that there would be steps to announcing this. So if you could, since we took his comment earlier, either he's right or he's wrong. Can you answer to that?
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Jackson, I believe he's right, at least in part. And what I'm that the process has not been followed to the letter of the board's intent. However, I do think you can correct that today by addressing, after public testimony, if that's what the commission would like, first the matter of whether or not you find this to be a public benefit as articulated by the board, and then to move on the project, to consider the merits of the project. So my preference would have been that we were before the commission today at an earlier date.
Just to follow on that, just, I come from a community that reads the fine print. And that's kind of why I ask, because we have discussions about findings about community being able to provide comment on an issue if they know in advance that it's coming. And that was the portion of Mr. Fields' remarks I was addressing.
Mr. Chair, just on the public notice portion of this, I think it's very clear that people knew the project was coming.
Commissioner Valencia.
Mr. Chair, this is an item that's on the agenda, and I think we should go through the proper procedure of hearing it, let the applicant make maybe a small presentation, not a great in-depth presentation, and then make these decisions after the presentation. I think once an item comes on the agenda, it's our responsibility to see that they have an opportunity to present their case. The second decision then later on will be whether it's appropriate or not to continue, and then we can debate that, but now is to proceed with the project.
Mr. Chair, my comments weren't intended to shortcut the hearing process. I just wanted to give you some context as to what you'll be hearing, because this is a bit of an unusual case, and you've been hearing about it for some time. The second issue you haven't heard about. You ready for me to move on to that? Or maybe all of you haven't heard about it, but we have a second procedural issue with this project, and that is related to tribal consultation. We have not initiated tribal consultation. In fact, the tribe initiated it on Monday through a letter, and I become aware of that deficiency through a conversation actually with Mr. Jackson, who asked me about, or Commissioner Jackson, who asked me whether or not tribal consultation had occurred. And when I looked into the matter, discovered that it had not. So the commission's going to hear about that today, and we'll need to discuss further how to address that as we move through the hearing.
And Mr. Chair, to finish up my comment, once we hear this, we will make a determination that I'm sure we're going to make a determination that we can't take any action. So we're not in violation of anything, I think. I think the public or a developer always has the right to bring a project forward. Once it's on the agenda, it has a right to bring and make a presentation. And to me, that's all this is a presentation of a possible future project if it meets all its requirements.
Well, I agree with you, Commissioner Valencia, that the project can and should be heard. It's been noticed for this time and place, and we certainly want to give the applicant as well as all the members of the public who have come today an opportunity to address us on these various issues. I just thought it would be helpful to get them up front, so we know that these issues are lurking and must be dealt with at some time during the hearing. With respect to consultation, Council, I for the first time had a chance to study the various statutes involved, and correct me if my initial impression is incorrect, but consultation is something the legislature requires in the case of general plan amendments, not only for representatives of designated tribes, but also for other entities such as school districts and other local agencies. The concept being that a general plan amendment is significant and may impact other governmental agencies. I'm not sure Ms. Black didn't mention whether that's occurred in this case, but do you agree that the consultation is broader than just the designated tribe?
Mr. Chair and members of the Commission, consultation may in some circumstances be broader. I'm not aware of any consultation requirements that were not fulfilled with respect to this case other than the SB 18 tribal consultation requirement.
Okay. Have you had a chance to consider whether the fact that consultation has not occurred would preclude us from holding any kind of hearing on the project?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, I believe you can go forward with a hearing. It may be that the necessary mechanism would be conceptual, accepting testimony on the issues solely.
It would certainly seem that if consultation is required, the results of that need to be known before the Commission can take action on the project.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, the purpose of consultation is to engage in meaningful discussion with the tribe regarding tribal concerns, with any tribe regarding tribal concerns, to inform the process or to inform the ultimate board decision on a general plan amendment.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Allen. With that then, let's proceed with a presentation from staff on the project so we're all well informed as to exactly what it is. Then we'll offer the applicant an opportunity to address the procedural issues as well as the merits, and then of course open the hearing to members of the public. We anticipate that with the number of speaker slips, this will take some time, so at an appropriate point, we'll take a 10-minute break and allow everyone to stretch and walk around. But we'll get started and see how far we can go with the hearing process. And we welcome Mr. Karamitsos. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, season's greetings. I'd like to just turn it over to Mr. Tetley for the staff presentation.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Tetley.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I'll start by a brief orientation of the project location. Here we have the town of Los Olivos, Highway 154 coming through east and west here, and it's about approximately 3-acre parcel in the town of Los Olivos with some two existing structures. Next is a close-up of the site with Grand Avenue to the east. The project site is bounded on all four sides by public roads, and again, State Highway 154 to the north here. These are the two existing structures on the site here. Here's a land use designation map of the site. As been mentioned, approximately half of the site, southern half is designated general commercial with highway commercial on the north side. And the associated zoning map with the highway commercial designation on the north half of the property, and C2 retail commercial on the southern half. First, I'll briefly go over the permitting components of the project that's before you today. First, the comprehensive plan amendment for the northern, roughly half portion of the site from highway commercial to general commercial, and also the associated zoning map amendment for the same portion of the site from highway commercial to match the southern portion zoning of retail commercial, also known as C2. Thirdly is the tract map for a statutory airspace one-lot condominium subdivision, which allows for the individual sale of condominium units on one lot. Next is the development plan, which allows the construction of the mixed-use commercial and residential structural development. And we also have 2 conditional use permits. Firstly, for the alternative wastewater treatment system, which is sometimes called a batch wastewater treatment plant, and we have some more details about that portion of the project. And also a commercial use permit, which is required to approve a residential component of a mixed-use project in the C2 retail commercial zone. As for the project itself, the components of that is approximately 50,000 square feet of mixed-use commercial and residential development, with 10 proposed and 2 existing structures, which would result in a total of just over 26% of structural lot coverage, with about half of the balance of the site being covered by parking lot, proposed driveways, and hardscape, and about the remainder, 27%, being in open space and landscaping. There would be 8 3-bedroom townhomes that are proposed for the site in standalone structures and as mixed-use second-story components, and also 2 affordable studio apartments adjacent to the associated townhomes. Various retail, commercial, and office space, and a proposed restaurant. There is, and as part of public components of the project, there is a public open space plaza, a conference room meeting space that would be accessible and usable by the public, and also a 9-stall permanent restroom facility. And also we have the advanced septic treatment system I described earlier. Here we have a site plan of the proposed project with the different structures labeled here. Structures L and M are the existing structures you saw in the aerial photo. They're intended to remain. And to the west, we have 6 of the proposed townhomes right here. Restaurant and other retail office space in Building A, and other various structures which are 2-story and have the typical mixed-use variant of having retail space on the first floor and office and or residential uses on the second stories of these structures. A parking lot goes throughout the site here, with driveways proposed on the north on Railway, the south on Hanata, and we have the Grand Avenue main view of the public plaza here. Oh, by the way, the proposed restroom and conference space would be centrally located in the site, in this structure here. Here, quickly, we have some building details that I'll just put up on the screen briefly. We can go through this if the commission wishes to add more detail to that. It shows the square footage, and all the proposed structures are 2 stories, with the total being the grand total of 51,000 and some square feet of total new structural development, including the existing 2 structures. First, the first procedural issue that we've discussed already about the Board of Supervisors policy that was adopted in May 2005, limiting the types of projects that could come before the board for approvals of general plan amendments with the ongoing community plan process. As proposed, the project would be compliant with the countywide retail commercial zone, as well as the C2 MU zone is proposed currently as a draft in the San Ynez Community Plan. And this being that the two key components of the mixed-use overlay that would affect the property as rezoned is that it lessens the parking standards of proposed development and also lowers barriers to introducing residential development. And this is to encourage mixed-use projects of the sort that is proposed for the project site. But in the case of, say, lessened parking standards, you'd be able to approve a denser project with less requirement for parking. And lastly, that the merits of the proposed project as considered by the Planning Commission may warrant a formal GPA initiation and approval recommendation to the board, given the public benefit components of the project. Next, as we mentioned, the second procedural issue is the tribal consultation, the Senate Bill 18 process. And the state tribal consultation guidelines requires that the local governments consult with Native American Heritage Commission identified tribes for the purpose of protecting traditional tribal cultural places. As mentioned, this consultation process applies to general plan amendments and specific plans. And we're in receipt of a consultation request from the San Ynez Band of Chumash Indians dated Monday, December 10th. And as far as the San Ynez Community Plan process and the associated general plan amendments, that consultation process is ongoing. I'm prepared to go briefly over the specifics of the project policies and the environmental review of the project if the Planning Commission wishes at this time.
Yes, thank you.
One of the key components of the project, as mentioned by Commissioner Valencia, a project several years ago was approved for the site, the Country Gardens Motel, when the land was owned by Fess Parker. And that project was approved based on the limits of the general area considering septic disposal. It is within, the project itself is within a special problems area identified for septic. And with the change of ownership and the desire for a mixed-use, higher density project, there's no feasible alternative than to propose an advanced treatment system instead of the standard treatment that is used countywide. And the proposed for the advanced wastewater treatment system, it's called a Septitech system. It has primary and secondary filtering of the wastewater, disinfection treatment, and also includes a subsurface drip or leach field system for dispersal. We do have in the audience today Mr. Paul Jensen from Environmental Health Services to answer any questions the Commission may have about the advanced septic treatment system that's proposed. These are also referred to as packaged water treatment plants. And as far as approval of this system, the jurisdiction lies within the Regional Water Quality Control Board due to the expected flow rates from the site to be greater than 2,500 gallons per day. And due to the public commercial nature of the site, rather than, say, a individual system for a residential one-lot development, the San Ynez Community Services District has agreed to manage the operation, maintenance, and monitoring of the system in perpetuity via agreement. Next, we have the environmental review process that the project has seen to date. In your packet is the proposed final mitigated negative declaration that has been prepared for the project. The draft document was circulated for a 30-day public review through the state clearinghouse. An environmental hearing was held on November 7th in Los Olivos, where 19 members of the public and people from the applicant's team were there, and we had some minor comments from the public regarding traffic and night lighting issues that we were able to address. And there are no residual Class 1 or significant impacts as determined by staff in the proposed document. Here's a listing of, excuse me, of the impacts and mitigation measures that would reduce these impacts to less than significant level. Real briefly, in regards to aesthetics and visual resources, landscaping and lighting plans, design review by the Central County Board of Architectural Review would reduce impacts due to changes to the visual character and neighborhood compatibility with the project site. Air quality issues mostly revolve around dust generation during construction, where standard erosion and dust control plans and monitoring would abate those issues. Potential odors from uses on the site, including a restaurant, can be reduced through approval of an odor abatement plan. As far as cultural resources, there are no known significant archaeological or cultural resources on the site. So we have our standard mitigation measures of work stoppage if there is a disturbance of any unknown subsurface resources. Next, with fire protection, impacts due to development beyond the safe response time of 5 minutes and project-caused fire hazard would be reduced by various fire suppression and response measures that are required from the fire department and required to be met prior to project occupancy, including sprinkling of structures and provision of fire hydrants in the area. Under geologic processes, standard erosion and unstable earth conditions situations may arise, although the project is essentially flat. And so we've applied the standard erosion sediment control requirements on the project. Structures would be required to be designed to meet the seismic zone 4 standards through the building and safety review process. Under hazardous materials risk of upset, as alluded to by the name Stage Stop Plaza, the proposed site has some historical significance as a stop on the stage route that historically went from Santa Barbara through the North County. And there is a saloon site, and there's also some past uses that may have used hazardous materials. And so if these are discovered, a hazardous materials business plan would be required to be adopted by the fire department and monitored through the fire department. And under historical resources, there is a known historical site related to the old Acme Saloon, which was operating on the site in the past. And due to this, similar to the archaeological issue of discovery upon disturbance, that work stoppage would occur upon that discovery. Also, the project is proposing some historical interpretive displays in order to interpret the historical significance of the site to the public. Next is noise. There is a potential for long-term exposure due to the proximity of some structures, including residential structures, to Highway 154, which is the key noise source in this area. And so noise studies and proper construction techniques to abate noise intrusion into the outside and interior of these residences is required. And as far as short-term construction noise, equipment shielding and temporary noise barriers would be required to limit the noise impacts on the adjacent properties. Under public facilities, the only impacts to those is a cumulative waste generation impact, which would be mitigated by adoption of a solid waste management plan, which addresses recycling and source reduction techniques. And finally, under water resources or flooding, there's a number of impacts and mitigation measures related to surface water quality, potential groundwater degradation due to increased impermeable development. And these are being mitigated through the inclusion of retention, infiltration, and recharge plans, biofiltration on the site, filtering for all drain inlets coming from the site, approval of a National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit. As far as design review, the project has gone through several hearings before the Central County Board of Architectural Review, and the project architecture and site design has been very well received by the CBAR. The excerpted meeting notes and comments for the CBAR is part of your packet. As far as policy and ordinance consistency, aside from the procedural issues we've discussed, the proposed project's determined to be consistent with all applicable comprehensive plan policies, and zoning ordinance provisions would be satisfied with the approval of these discretionary permits, including proposed structural setbacks, proposed number of parking spaces. They're all satisfied as far as the proposal goes in relation to the retail commercial C2 zoning district. And our recommendation, again, aside from the procedural issues we discovered, is that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the proposed project to the ultimate review authority, which is the Board of Supervisors, following the procedure in the staff report. And again, staff is here with any questions you may have, including Mr. Paul Jensen in regards to the proposed advanced septic treatment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tedley. Very thorough as always. Commissioner Valencia has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, on 6119, public facilities, I had it, impacts lack of restrooms and plan. Wouldn't that go in there in public facilities? Wouldn't you put that in?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Valencia, I'm not sure what you're referring to, 6119.
Well, page 11, that's what you had on the board was in our staff report. And when I went through it, when I got to public facilities, I noticed in the map that there weren't, restrooms were lacking throughout the plans that I received. Restrooms for all of the offices, none of them had restrooms. 1, 2, didn't seem like there were enough restrooms for the general public.
I see. Mr. Chair, Commissioner Valencia, I would rely on the applicant to address the adequacy of the number of restrooms for the commercial uses as distinguished from the residential uses. I do know that the proposed public restrooms in Building J are not meant to address the commercial uses on site. I believe that those are meant solely for public use, but the applicant would be able to address that.
Oh, you're welcome. Any other questions at the outset for Mr. Tetley?
Mr. Tetley, you refer to a special problems area. Can you help me with a discussion of what that is? Is there an overlay which determines it? I also noticed that one of the aspects of the project said leach field. The site looks pretty well covered. Can you help me a little bit with that? And additionally, just third question along the same line, I believe the California Water Quality Control Board issues an approval as part of what you've said here. Is that issues or issued? Is that in place now, or is that subject to a review?
Do you want to refer to Mr. Jensen for some or all of the responses?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Jackson, I can try to address them. I think Mr. Jensen would be able to add additional detail. There are a number of areas in the county that have special overlays, as you called them, Commissioner Jackson, called special problem areas. They're for a number of reasons. For example, in portions of the town of Los Alamos are subject to flooding, and so portions of that town are in what's called a special problems area, where there's an additional layer of review, and there's a special committee that reviews projects proposed in these areas with potentially special conditions placed on a project and special permits required. In the case of Los Olivos, there's a special problems area that's been adopted, or an overlay, for issues of poor performance for septic systems. Soils are, in general, in the area are high in nitrates. They're of very slow permeability, et cetera. So there is special review and concern about septic systems in this area. And one of the ways addressed in this site, given not so much site constraints on this particular site, but the density proposed, is that we have a lot of wastewater flow expected, and so the advanced treatment system is meant to address that on this particular site. As far as the regional board's approval, I believe contact has been made with the Regional Water Quality Control Board. I do not think that they have held a hearing or have approved any permits as part of this project. They are conditioned to receive that approval prior to moving forward in the permit process. But I don't think that's taken place at this point. I think I addressed all your questions. Maybe Mr. Jensen would like to add something.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. The county designated Los Olivos Township as a special problems area for wastewater disposal, I believe in the late 1970s. Since the 1980s, the Regional Water Quality Control Board has mandated that commercial development within the special problems area be limited to no more than 375 gallons per acre per day. This is to keep the density low so that further degradation of the groundwater will be somewhat mitigated. In previous, Commissioner Valencia mentioned in a previous project here, I was the one who reviewed that, and that was limited to 1,162 gallons of discharge per day using the regional board requirements of 375 gallons per acre per day. This project has a peak design flow of 17,300 gallons per day, which, using a standard disposal, wastewater treatment and disposal, would not have been allowed by the regional board. However, using this advanced treatment system, which eliminates the vast majority of the constituents of concern, the regional board has conceptually approved the use of this kind of system for this project. They cannot issue a permit. They would be, well, let me back up a second. The regional board issues a permit called a waste discharge requirement. It's an operating permit. It contains all the criteria of operating of the treatment system, the monitoring, the maintenance. But they cannot even bring it to their board until there is a certified environmental document. So they cannot completely approve it other than, yes, it looks good, until such time as we have an approved environmental document. So while the regional board staff has said that they have no objection to the use of this kind of system at this level of discharge, no permit from the regional board has yet been issued.
Is that sufficient, Mr. Jackson?
Well,
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Jensen. I'm sure we'll have more questions about the system itself as we move along, but would like to move to the applicant at this point and get a presentation on any issues that have either been presented or not by staff. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Planning Commissioners. My name is April Verbanek, and I'm the planner for the Stage Stop Development project. And thank you very much for your time and consideration this morning, and a very special thanks to staff for helping us navigate the process to date. From the beginning, Brian, can you, next slide, please? From the beginning of the planning process, the applicants wanted to develop this project with three primary objectives. That was to develop a project that meets community goals, to maintain and enhance the rural and historic character of the town of Los Olivos, and to provide valuable resources for the residents that live there. Next slide, please. We very much believe that these objectives have been achieved and are evident by the very careful and innovative site design that you see today, as well as the numerous letters of support that we've received from the community. This report basically resulted from just reaching out to the residents of Los Olivos and hearing from them what their concerns and desires were for the community, and then addressing those concerns and desires in the proposed project. As such, the project before you includes significant public benefits. These include public open space, a community conference center, public restrooms to replace the portable restrooms that are now in the town, public parking resources, which are badly needed, substantial on and off-site drainage improvements, particularly for the west and south portions of the town of Los Olivos, roadway, pedestrian, and vehicle circulation improvements, recognition of the community history, which is reflected in both the name of the project as well as the design and the historic display that's proposed. And then I wanted to add also, it's the intent of the proposed development to provide badly needed commercial resources for those that live in the town of Los Olivos. Next slide, please. As your staff has indicated, the project is consistent with current comprehensive plan policies, as the proposed project is located entirely within the commercial core and an urban area of the town of Los Olivos. The project has also been designed to complement the current mix of commercial and residential uses that surround the property. As mentioned, the property owners were determined from the very beginning to develop a project that meets the community goals, and this required very careful consideration of the existing zoning of the property, particularly the north one half of the property that's currently subject to the highway commercial land use designation and highway commercial zoning. The community has time and time again indicated that these are not desirable uses for this property. Gas stations, automobile service stations, motel facilities, the community was very clear in that this is not what they want. As such, today you have before you a request for a general plan amendment and a rezone for the north one-half portion of the property. This proposed general plan amendment and rezone will allow the Stage Stop Plaza project to be developed consistent with the existing county policies for general commercial land use and retail commercial zoning. And this can be done entirely within the existing confines of the county's land use regulations. The general plan amendment and rezone would affect only the north one-half portion of the property and would thus eliminate the undesirable highway commercial land use and zoning designation. Next slide, please. While the proposal is consistent with current provisions of the county's general plan relative to general commercial uses and retail commercial zoning, it's also very important to note that we've been very careful in designing the project to ensure that it's also consistent with the vision and goals of the pending community plan. Pursuant to the pending community plan, this project is slated to be rezoned to the retail commercial and mixed use overlay. The proposed project has been designed in compliance with each and every policy and development standard that's been identified in the community plan to date. This includes providing a balance of residential and commercial floor area, affordable housing, proposed commercial uses and design that require that commercial uses be located on the ground floor along public street frontages, as well as parking. Upon adoption of the community plan, the proposed mixed-use overlay designation would be appropriately applied to the property, and the project itself would comply with all of those provisions. Staff has suggested 2 processing options for the proposed project in light of the pending community plan. We're hoping that this commission will recognize the uniqueness of this project and the benefits to the community that it provides. We very respectfully request that the commission recommend that the board approve the project irrespective of the community plan process. To do so would present a significant obstacle to project feasibility as it's presented today, and also would cause a very much undue delay in the community benefits that the project offers. I'd also just like to state very clearly for the record that the proposed general plan amendment and rezone can be done pursuant to existing county policies and is identical to what's identified in the pending community plan. The only difference would be applying the mixed-use overlay to the property once the community plan is adopted. We were notified this morning about the issues regarding the consultation pursuant to SB 18. We definitely think that this is a very important process. However, we'd like to offer another option for complying with that, and that would be to conduct that consultation, assuming that the Planning Commission can support our project today before we move on to the Board of Supervisors. And with that, I'm going to wrap up and turn it over to the rest of our applicant team, who will describe some of the more details of the project to you. Thank you.
Chair Cooney and members of the board, Brian, technically, could we please have the next slides? I'd like to speak to the attributes of the project, and I'll keep it short, Commissioner Valencia, but I also like to answer some of your questions regarding the bathrooms and et cetera. First of all, this is the major hinge piece of the downtown Los Olivos, and its intent through the Sarluces, who are great citizens of San Ynez and own a lot of property that they have carefully taken care of. Listen carefully to the community as they went forward on this. Because as we will show you in this, we could have gone forward with highway commercial, which would have allowed us to put gas station, fast food, car repair, et cetera, along the highway, but it was not the interest of the Sarluces or the interest of the community to stay within the guidelines of the highway commercial property. And so that as you look at the piece, you can see that there are a lot of edges of that which are not improved. Can we have the next slide, please? So the master plan and land plan takes into consideration the needs of the community. Well, I'll go into community good in a couple of seconds. But one of the things that it really does is it ends up improving, which is community good, a lot of things that are very dangerous in San Ynez and Los Olivos right now, and Los Olivos particularly, where there are no pedestrian walkways along Alamo Pintado, that the drainage systems have created very deep swales along Alamo Pintado, which people will fall out of their cars, and we've seen that happen, and cannot traverse the pedestrian area without going into the streets. This project will fix that. Also, the drainage from the site addresses things that the county has wanted to do for years regarding taking care of the drainage of this portion of Los Olivos. That's all community good. We have decided to do some mixed use on the property because we felt that the county has told us all through this process that there is a need for housing in the urban area, particularly for people that are residents of the Los Olivos and San Ynez Valley. Next slide, please. So you can see that in this slide, the A and B buildings on top are within the highway commercial corridor, which could have been proposed as gas station and fast food, et cetera, which would not have asked for anything within this hearing. The L and M buildings are existing buildings, so there's not really a tremendous amount of development. One of the next slides, I believe, Mr. Tetley, if you can go to the next one, starts to show the community benefits. In the new San Ynez plan that is being proposed, we can reduce the parking based on what you are proposing. The Sarluces felt that there is a dearth and there's a lack of parking for the community, and they then are proposing to do the parking along Railway for the community benefit. And they are not restricting the parking on site for only those people that are going to be on the site, but allow the people that will be using San Ynez and Los Olivos' facilities to park and to enjoy. And the red boxes you see are also community benefits. There's a high amount of community benefits here. The park that's in the center under the large rectangle is larger than the park that is at the flagpole at this time, and will be open for community affairs and will be managed by and paid for, except for only small maintenance numbers by the Sarlus family. The small red block that's under J is the community bathrooms. And addressing Commissioner Valencia's question, these A, B, J, K, L, or not the L buildings, but are shown as shells only. There are bathrooms that are going to be in those buildings as the needs are then defined. And those have been calculated in the wastewater systems design. And so that the only bathrooms shown right now are community benefit bathrooms. And as the plans are submitted to the county, they will be submitted with the bathrooms required by code and ordinances and satisfy restaurant and retail uses. The other thing that the Sarluses have asked us as we started with this project, which was 3 years ago, by the way, that this be something that is not just wine tasting, but starts giving the community of Los Olivos the type of services and retail that will enhance the community and make it a well-balanced community, not just a tourist community with wine tasting and food, but give them the things that aren't there right now. We've been very careful, which we'll show you in a slide in a second, where the C, D, E, F, G, H buildings face across to the housing that's across from Maddie's, and so that the textures of the street around the project meet the goals of what the community asks for and what the community exists as, and that's residential to residential, commercial to commercial. Open space that gives the project something that gives the community a lot of benefit, and I think that's what we're here for today. So the red boxes, as you see, are all community benefit boxes, which would not have necessarily been offered unless we felt that we were serving the community in a great way and making this project something that was palatable to the people we have talked to as we asked questions for the last 3 years of the citizens of Los Olivos. We also went through 2 of the C-Bar meetings where when C-Bar said, are you taller than Maddie's? Are you a big building? We want to see more roof undulation. We did all that. They wanted to see the break between A and B so that pedestrians could move from the traffic or from the parking area along Railway Plaza to the square. We did that. The landscape architect has worked hard on trying to create pedestrian patterns around the site which would be safe so people did not have to walk in the street. And also, as I said, the engineers can speak to this because everybody's here, of the drainage systems that now exist along the areas that are Alamo Pintado are very dangerous because of the swales that are there in order to move water, and there is no walking system along Honata, and all of that is being provided by the project. And so that if you look at the way that the project is porous, it invites people in from Grand Avenue, from Honata, and from the parking areas, and it separates itself well from the existing residential that is against Maddie's. Next slide, please. The plaza then, as I said earlier, is bigger than the one that is next to the flagpole. It's adjacent to the bathrooms and the conference center, which will be managed by the Sarlus family and allowed and open to the public, and the only charges will be just for the maintenance of those buildings during the time that it's being given to the public, bathroom cleanup, etc., so that they're not looking at charging them high rents for those spaces. It's community benefit space. The plaza also is an interpretive area where all the history of Los Olivos will be described in plaques around the walk system that is around the square. The landscape architect can speak to that if you request. But it is going to show the history of Los Olivos, this train destination, and also the saloon, whatever happened on the site earlier. But it is a public place that is badly needed. The only place in Los Olivos now is the Grange for public meetings, and this will now give us another place which is contemporary and heated and will be air-conditioned and close to bathrooms for public space meetings. Next, please. So the site, as we know now, is the main corner of Grand and 154. And the development of the site, in a very sensitive way, will complete the downtown of Los Olivos and give them all the community benefits that I've spoken to. Next, please. The architecture that exists today in Los Olivos relates to an old western town. The building on the top left is an existing building on this site, which will not be changed architecturally, but has some Victorian, some of the farm, some of the ranch, and some of the earlier architecture of towns that are famous to us and also well loved. You can see in the background of the slide on the top and on the right that there is a new building, and that this, as you see the sensitivity of what we have done on this site, that we've really come back to something that could have been built 100 years ago. And as we look at the next slides, we'll see that. Please, next one, please, Mr. Daly. These are the residents across the street against the Maddie site, and what we've done in the next slides you'll see is try to repeat those pieces, the Victorian pieces and the pieces of the gables, which we were asked to by C-Bar, which we had very, very high comments on, and we're very proud of that. Next, please. So this is what we start to look like. As we're looking from 154, you can see that we've taken the texture of the downtown Los Olivos area kept it small in its scale, it's kept below the Maddie's Ridge lines, and broken it up so there's a tremendous amount of open space and no mass bulk and scale issues, and taken all the components from the downtown buildings and used those as pieces that we could put together a contemporary but old project that really says, I'm part of Los Olivos. Next, please. So the residential, as you can see across the street from the Maddie's residential, is almost identical in its character, and it is trying to repeat a streetscape and knit together a residential neighborhood that is on the edge that really speaks well to the fact that people living within an urban area can walk as a village to the commercial and not get in a car. And this project is about not getting in a car. It's really about the village, the walking village, which is what you're trying to do in your general plan. Please. So that we can look, I want you to look at the top slide on the right, because Maddie's is on the far right. And you can see that the project itself is not in any conflict with the scale of Maddie's, and it does not try to take the historic elements of Los Olivos and overshade them or overpower them in any way. And even the water tower, which is in the center of the project, which is really the elevator, is dressed up to look like it may have been there 100 years ago as part of the train station or part of the stage stop. Next, please. So going back to landscape, which can be spoken to by Arcadia, who is here, we're working with drought resistant. We're working with landscape that will work with the wastewater system that has been designed. It is answering Commissioner Jackson's question. It is not leach field. It is going to be a high-pressure drip system, which is Mr. Wilson's here. That is the I would say the head of all systems in the state of California. Did the Audubon Society in Los Angeles, worked in Malibu, and has satisfied a lot of the communities that had initial questions regarding this type of system. He's here to answer that. We have the engineer who's here from Flowers to talk to you about the streets. I'm not going to take much more time. I just want to say that we think that we have listened for 3 years. We think that we have submitted a project that contains a tremendous amount of community good that can be found by this commission for the reason for approval. We think that we fit within what the plan will be in the future and what the plan is right now. So we don't think that there's any real conflicts in this plan, but it is really all community good. Open for questions, and I don't want to take any more time.
Commissioner Valencia has a question.
Yes, could you put the other slide that shows the face of all the buildings? That's good enough. This roof is perpendicular to all these faces here, and I would think that you would have put some kind of small peaks on there to eliminate that mass. I like everything that I saw, and that's the only comment that I had on there. And I know you're a world-renowned architect, and I had one class in drafting 50 years ago, but so please don't feel offended.
If you will look at the slide just below that, you will see that there is a peak. And if I can approach it very quickly without a mic. This is the edge of that building. So the peak comes. Commissioner Valencia, this is the roof you're speaking about.
Yes.
And this is the way that it looks as you turn the corner on Grand. So that really is a gable. There is peaks, and we did answer CBAR's questions on that and broke the building here, so that.
And that looks very nice. That looks nice. But on this view here, you see just the mass. Do you follow what I see?
I absolutely hear you, and we will return. We have gone through the process with CBAR. We'll go back. We'll do whatever you ask us to do.
No, I'm not asking you. I mean, I know you're a classy architect, but it would seem, just from somebody who sees these once in a while, and we're always concerned about masses, it seemed that some relief would be necessary.
We will study that.
And I'll leave it at that.
We will study that. Thank you very much.
I think that's all for now.
Thank you.
Mr. Burkus, thank you very much.
Chair Cooney, do you want any of our other team to make a presentation to you regarding the civil engineering aspects of how the city is being, or the township is being improved by the drainage systems and the road systems that are being attacked around the property?
I think it would, I'm not going to suggest to you how to make your presentation, Mr. Burkus, but I do think one of the issues, one of the preliminary issues that we're going to have to deal with, if not today, in the near future, is the public benefit, whether
Okay.
this fits into an exception. So you're certainly entitled to open the subject now.
I would very much like to do that. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Commissioners. My name is Ron Rohr. I'm with the company Flowers and Associates Civil Engineers. We're the project engineers for the project, working with the team here. Bob Flowers does apologize for not being here. He had a prior commitment that he could not, that this was a conflict with. We have also Wes Barber in Santa Barbara available for any questions. He's our company hydrologist. And I'm told that members of Public Works, Brett Stewart, Tom Fayram, Will Robertson from Traffic would be available if necessary. Real briefly, I don't want to, in the interest of brevity, I just want to cover the public, the road improvements around the project, and then discuss briefly the flood control meetings that we've had. We have met several times over the last few months, and more recently November 29th with members of Public Works, Brett Stewart, as I said, Will Robertson, and Traffic. If we could go to it's the following slide, please. There we go. As you can see there, we have standard improvements around the project, again, working with Public Works, Railway Avenue. We have implemented a proposed right turn only onto Grand Avenue. That is in response to the traffic study. Therefore, traffic heading easterly off Railway Avenue would only be able to turn right into Grand Avenue. There's additional 90-degree street parking on Railway, widening of the street to meet county standards, curb, gutter, and sidewalk. On Grand Avenue, additional widening there to meet the county standards, curb, gutter, and sidewalk there. On Nahoki Avenue, additional asphalt, curb, and gutter, and sidewalk. And then, and I'll come back to the storm drain here briefly, but on Hanada, additional widening to make that Hanada's is currently basically a gravel street, gravel driveway. That would be a 27 feet of asphalt, curb, gutter, and sidewalk, and where there's a large specimen pepper tree that we've been asked to protect there, so we've got a bulb around that, and that's been, again, discussed with Public Works, and that's been agreed to. We will have a new storm drain on the Hanada Street, picking up predominantly all of the storm drainage coming off the site. And that will go to the southwest corner of the project and would head south down Nahoki Avenue. If you could, I don't know, if we could go back to this real briefly. It would be number 6, if you could. Please, Brian. There we can see Nahoki Avenue running south with this new storm drain. And again, this has been worked out with flood control, and they're totally in agreement with this, to run down to tie into an existing drainage into Alamo Pintado Creek. One of a very big benefit of this storm drain is currently there are issues with on Alamo Pintado Road and on that whole project to the south that just drains, as you see the site there, pretty much drains due south through the existing.
Excuse me, Mr. Rohr. It would be helpful if you had a pointer that
Okay.
you could show us those particular streets.
Does it give directions with this? There we go. All right. All right, got it. So directly, the new storm drain would start at this, well, it would actually be on Railway Parade. New storm drain would pick up and here a major storm drain coming through and down into Alamo Pintado and down into the Alamo Pintado Creek. There are problematic areas right here in the existing park. Right now, there's an existing DI, drainage inlet, that collects a lot of the water from this site that has no outlet. It's a sump. It was put in a couple of decades ago, and it basically has no outlet. One of the benefits of putting a new storm drain in here is we've talked with Public Works, and that would now give them a place to tie that drainage inlet into, and therefore alleviate that drainage problem in that area. Also, on this side of Alamo Pintado Road, there's currently a large depressed asphalt swale there that then goes into a storm drain that goes across Nahoki and out into Alamo Pintado Creek this way. That also is problematic. It's a very difficult place for vehicles and especially pedestrians to navigate. Public Works has also indicated that would, by putting in this storm drain, it would allow them to then fix that problem. Again, this is something that's been worked out with flood control and Public Works, and we've had their input. I think that completes what I need to say. If you have any other questions.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Of course.
On these streets here, do you plan to do reconstruction, 2-inch overlay, or chip and seal?
Which streets are those?
These streets
Streets,
here. And I also want to know, are you going to do the full width of the street or just your half? on these?
Just the to complete those streets to Public Works standards would be depending on in the individual street encountered. There's in some cases we're putting in a full 27 foot of asphalt. In other cases, it's just a matter of widening it to get to the location of the new curb gutter and sidewalk. And
So it'll be a 2-inch, roughly a 2-inch overlay or something on the existing?
where we're widening the street, it would be a complete new road
Reconstruction?
section, reconstruction of that,
Reconstruction.
what is currently gravel-based road.
So that would be this street here.
That one would be completely reconstructed.
But this one here has
That one
some-
has some asphalt. We'd be
Ri-
extending that out to the curb and gutter and sidewalk on the side.
On both sides?
No, just
Just
on the
on your
side.
side.
What is necessary to complete that street, to make it comply with the Santa Barbara County Public Works standards.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Rohr? Don't see any. Thank you very much. Does that complete the applicant's presentation, Mr. Burkus?
I believe in the interest of time that completes it, and that we will have anybody here that you would like to talk to regarding the science of the system for the wastewater or anything more on civil engineering, or I'd be glad to answer any questions you have on architecture, on gables and on hip. The long roof, by the way, looks like Maddie's.
Right. All right. We're ready to turn to public comment, but I think we've been at it an hour. Let's take a 10-minute break and start again at 5 minutes to 11. Thank you. We're back on the record. This is the Santa Barbara County Planning Commission meeting of December 12, 2007. And we're about to go to public comment. But before doing so, I'd like to lay the foundation for this discussion. In consulting with County Counsel and Ms. Black, it appears that the threshold question of whether there's an exception to the Board of Supervisors policy adopted in 2005 with regard to the Santa Ynez Valley Community Plan to allow this project to go forward is whether it presents a substantial community benefit. We are in a position, the four of us here today, to make a determination as to whether that exception does apply in this case, whether it should apply. It would be the first instance since the Board of Supervisors passed its resolution for the Planning Commission to consider that issue. We will not be able to reach a recommendation today for or against this project and send it along to the Board of Supervisors. We have two at least procedural issues standing in the way besides the issue of whether the general plan exception applies. So what we're going to do is take public comment today, and we appreciate everyone coming up to share their time with us on the issue of the public benefit. so that we can reach a conclusion on that either before or after we break for lunch. We have to do that as well. One of our commissioners has an important meeting to attend. So we will take a break about 11:45. And if any of you want to and haven't had a chance to address us on this issue, or we haven't had a chance to discuss it, we will come back after the lunch break and finish up. But as I say, while we're not going to tell you what to say, the issue we're interested in today, as opposed to somewhere down the line when this project comes back to us, is whether the exception to the Board of Supervisors policy of not processing general plan amendments during the pendency of a general plan amendment process is something we can do and recommend to the board today. So I hope that's clear. If you want to comment on the other aspects of the project that we've heard about from staff and from Mr. Burkus and his staff, we're certainly able to do that. But we're most interested in the public benefit issues, and the resolution is significant community benefit. All right, with that as a preface, we have numerous speaker slips. If you don't want to speak on that particular issue or don't want to take your time to speak, by all means, let us know, but we welcome any input we can get. The first speaker is John Peckham, and the second is Larry Sarloos.
I'll let Larry go first. I'm John Peckham. I just want to say I'm 100% for the project. I've been to Los Olivos and Hunter Valley for over 55 years, and I've watched it grow. I like it.
Thank you, Mr. Peckham. Mr. Sarloos.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Larry Sarloos, and I live in the San Ynez Valley in Los Olivos, and the applicant for the project. I need to tell you that I'm very proud of the project that you have in front of you without any limitations or qualifications. You might also note that my brother and I are not developers, otherwise we never would have brought this project before you. What we have brought before you is something that we started 3 years ago. And what I'm going to talk about are components of this project of 3 years ago. These are not something that we dreamed up in the last 6 weeks or in the last 6 months. You might remember through some newspaper articles that we were going to have a museum component at little to no rent on this facility. That's presently called Wildling Museum that is in Los Olivos. We also currently have 12 too many parking spaces for this project. And if this project was going to go and be extended, we can probably take out 30 parking spaces, because with the new zoning, the requirement for parking is less. But currently, not counting the Railway Avenue, we have 12 too many parking spaces for our square footage. You notice that we have 26% density to land on this project. I can point out places in Los Olivos that have 75, 80, 90, or 90%, 95% density of building to land. So you can see at 26%, we've got a lot of open space. We pay particular attention to not be taller than any a building in town. One of the local architects says, well, why aren't you putting 5 feet on all of these buildings? What we came back to him was, because that's not the look that we were after. We always had the park component in, bigger than the park that I was a part of buying for the citizens of Los Olivos a few years back. I'm proud of that component. Weddings, Christmases, special events is what that park will be used for. Meeting room was also part of it. I'm part of a Lobo, and Los Olivos Business Owners is an organization that's trying to get restrooms in town. These 9 restrooms were going to be to help our town out. We've been transparent. We asked to be on the docket for the GPAC and VPAC. We were proactive. We didn't ask. They didn't come to us. We went to them. Initially, we had some discussion, but actually left those meetings in a very positive tone. We went to 2 CBAR meetings. We met and exceeded all of their recommendations.
I've been to local churches, communities, Father Stacy, a neighbor of ours, they made some recommendations we fulfilled. Been to Lobo meetings. I went to the defunct Los Olivos Board of Architectural Reviews. I met with them for 2 hours positively. We had an EIR meeting, and we had little to no negative comments. One last comment was on the drainage special problems area. There's been 11 borings on this particular piece of property over the course of the last 10 years. And we have not been able to hit water at 20 feet. And after the recent storm of 2 years ago, where we had 50 inches of rain up at the pass, I thought, maybe some of that water is going to run downhill. So in February of the following year, I also did another boring and found that there's no water table above 20 feet on this particular piece of property. I am proud of the people that are here today in support in the letters, 27 or so that you have in your packet. I don't know that I've ever been to a planning meeting where there's that much support and little opposition. So I am proud of our development, and I ask you to vote today to push this project on to the Board of Supervisors. And again, thank you for your time and effort, and also thank you for the recommendation that came from staff here today as well.
Thank you, Mr. Sarlis.
Any questions?
I don't see any right now. Thank you. Jeff Nichols, to be followed by Keith Sarlis.
Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Jeff Nichols. I am a proprietor of Maddie's Tavern, along with my brother Matt. As far as the issue concerning public access, I don't know how many of you here, well, most everybody here, I guess, is familiar with Los Olivos and the bathroom issue. I think that is a very excellent part of this project. On behalf of the Sarluses, I just wanted to say that I'm in favor of this project. When my brother and I first heard about the project, we had concerns. Obviously, when you come to Maddie's, there's nothing on the west of us or the east of us at the moment. So we have a very, well, Maddie's as it's been for generations. So we went to the Sarluses, and they've been very forthcoming. They showed us the project. We have seen them in our restaurant. I've been able to go up to them. They've been very forthcoming in any questions we've had. And in my life, people are very important to me. And from my sense, what I sense from the Sarluses is that they're very reasonable, very honorable people. And I would just like to show them my support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Nichols. Mr. Sarlis? Josh Yeager will be the next speaker.
Hello, everyone. My name is Keith Sarlos. I appreciate you guys seeing the project. I know we can only speak about a certain thing now, but I know that I'm actually Larry's son, Harvey's nephew. But don't let that discount anything, because usually we disagree on pretty much everything. The one thing that I think I have to say on their behalf is this project has really turned into public good that happens to have commercial buildings on property in order to fund it for the rest of the community. I know my father's heart, I know my uncle's heart, I know my heart. We moved here quite a while ago, but because of the people, and the best part, the word I can say that sums it all up is character. This project is right down the middle. It takes the character of the town in mind. It takes the character of the people in mind. When people said, hey, this is what we don't want to see, that was the first things that are off the list. When the community truly crafted where this was going to go. We want open space. We want this. We want a place where we can meet. We want public bathrooms. We want, the west side of the town drained. We want this. We want this. And that's really what this project has become. The tenants that that have looked at the project and are interested on renting there are things that, you know, round out our community. So all in all, this really is a community project, and that's where the heart of this project really is. And I just wanted to make sure I expressed that to you so you all knew that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Solis. Mr. Yeager, followed by Bill Craig.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. My name is Josh Yeager. I'd like to speak on behalf of the applicant and support them in this process with a note towards the public benefit. Though the subject is kind of boring, the work that Mr. Flower and his team have done regarding the drainage on Alaman Pintado, I think could be easily overlooked. You know, obviously in the town we think about the open space issues and the bathroom issues, but the health and safety items of having that street drained more properly, I believe is important. I also want to accommodate the applicant, or commend the applicant for establishing kind of a new standard in how the drainage of septic is done. It's certainly a cutting-edge technology that we hope is adopted by more business owners in town. And finally, Larry noted that if he was a developer, this project probably wouldn't go forward. And I want to say finally that you have a really unique piece of property here in this town. And whoever owns it is a custodian and a representative of that town. And it's unusual to have somebody with a commitment to the community, a commitment to the community good that eats their own cooking, so to speak. It's good to have somebody in town that's not from Los Angeles coming up here looking for the greatest IRR on a project, but is sensitive to the good that can be brought about by their activities. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Yeager. Mr. Craig, followed by Roswitha Craig?
Rosvita.
Rosvita. Thank
My
you.
name is Bill Craig, and I own Shoestring Winery. We've been through this process before, so I know it's really hard. But as I looked at Larry's project here, it's a win situation for the county. It's a win situation for the town. They're giving you open spaces, they're giving you bathrooms, and they're giving housing that people in the town would like to have. I don't see anything wrong with it. Larry, again, it's good for the taxes, it's good for the community, and they're even taking care of your drainage for you. So I don't see how you can turn this one down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. And Mrs. Craig.
Rosvita.
I like the way you say it.
Yeah. Being a property owner and business owner in the San Ynez Valley and having had to go before you, which took a very, very long time, we finally achieved our dream, and I just know this is totally a win-win situation. I think the Sarlus family has totally gone above board, done a lot of extra things they did not need to do. I also think it's very important to look at the integrity of the applicant. When you have an applicant coming before you that lives and works in the valley and is proposing a project in the valley, they tend to be, I think, a little more cautious about what they're building, what they want to live around, and it means a lot to me. One thing I would like to bring up is money, and I think as a project like this is delayed and postponed and the days go by, the applicant is sitting on bills that never stop. Every day they keep coming in, and it would be nice if there was some way you could actually expedite this to get it to move forward so that the money they're spending will be going to the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Craig. Jeff Seek. Mr. Seek will be followed by Lee Rosenberg.
Hello, thanks for hearing my comments. I want to start by saying I support the applicants. I support the project. I think this is a gateway property for Los Olivos. As people come up 154 and turn into Los Olivos, what they see right now is a pitted dirt lot that as has been stated, causes drainage issues, is not particularly attractive, and does nothing to contribute to the parking issues and the fact that almost every storefront is wine tasting. So I'm incredibly excited to see the Sarloses come in and take into account so well the ethos of Los Olivos and the opinions of the people there. They've been sensitive to local opinion, it's been stated. The need for increased parking is desperately needed. The public restrooms, of course, are key. But aside from that and from the public works issues that they're addressing, the fact that this will create locations for further businesses in the valley, for further jobs, as somebody who lives in the valley and commutes to Santa Barbara every day, it's exciting to think about more local economy in the valley. The Sarloses are longtime, over 9 or 10 year residents of the valley, and they have a record of community service and of businesses that serve the community. And when I think of them as how I know them both in business and in personal life, the two adjectives I think of are integrity and stewardship. They take their land and the things that they've been entrusted with incredibly seriously. And I think we are blessed as a community to have a group of people like the Sarloses. Instead of trying to extract the maximum dollar out, they really have tried to achieve the public good. And I think the result has been a project that surely only a zero growth activist could oppose. So I urge you to support it based on the public benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sieg. Mr. Rosenberg?
Thank you, Commissioners. My comments today will, as you'll hear them, merge the subjective and objective issues that are involved in this project. By subjective, I mean those things that hit the eye, those things that are in the periphery of vision, that contribute greatly to the aesthetic appeal of an area. And in particular, of course, I'm addressing this project. So that while we want to talk about public benefit, I think we must include within the context of public benefit that aesthetic appeal. In addition, the Stage Stop Plaza provides the potential, I've done some minimal calculations on this, but of additional income via a multiplier calculation for the city, or for the town, for the residents, and obviously for the business owners. And that multiplier, I think, should be taken into serious consideration when undertaking a project like this. So the appearance of the project clearly provides what I consider to be a finishing touch to Los Olivos and serves to complete what I view as my town, because I've lived there and around it for quite some time. Its architectural outline is commensurate with the look that characterizes the charm and utility of the town, a sort of 1890s, 1910 motif. The building, in addition, will be historic in name, appearance, and displays. We've discussed the displays, the historic description. It is in every way the right project for this side of town, in my opinion, and replaces a sort of orphaned lot of considerable size that adds nothing at present to the virtues of the town, except dirt and unruly weeds. I frequently take my dogs at the end of town to walk there, and have almost broken my ankle a number of times in the gopher holes. As we've discussed, the project will include mid to upscale shops, the gallery, all of which are much needed. And the shopping opportunities are less an issue with the guys than they are with the gals. And I've spoken to a number of ladies who have come forth on that issue who say that this is something that we would really like to have here. It'll also provide a much-needed restaurant that everyone agrees is missing from the valley, and I'll be coy about identifying the type of cuisine in deference to Mr. Sarlos, who wants to surprise post-construction diners. However, it'll service the tastes of residents and tourists within the valley, and I can assure you of that because it fills a vacuum which remarkably exists. And although it's a mundane issue, public toilets are nevertheless a critical concern for anyone who works in or who visits Los Olivos. At present, we have 2 eyesore porta potties, which, while confirming what in the minds of some are the rural cast of the town, have the worst possible aesthetic impact one could devise. The odors emanating from them are equally unpleasant. And they also pose a considerable inconvenience because people don't know where they are. They have to ask, which sometimes can be embarrassing. And then the porta potties themselves are not a place for upscale tourists or for residents when the need arises.
Mr. Rosenberg, sorry, but you're
Yep.
way over your limit. So
I'm
if you could
sorry.
wrap up,
Well,
thanks.
no one has ever accused me of being short-winded. Thank you, Commissioners. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of the project.
Thank you for your time. Chris Urquidez, and be followed by Sam Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Planning Commission members for hearing us today. My name's Chris Urquidez. I'm a longtime San Ynez Valley resident, also part of a local family-run company in Los Olivos, and I'm here to speak in support of the project. We've kind of scaled down what we're here to talk about now to a significant community benefit, and I think it's important to define what that means in this case. Many people have touched on the restrooms. That's great. We have the plaza area. That's great. We have extra parking. All great components that are going to help the town, the community, businesses, and so on. But I think you have to look at the project as a whole and how it's going to be a benefit to the community. It's going to complete the town. It's going to turn an empty lot that's been sitting for years into a great project, a great entry into Los Olivos, both for tourists and local residents. I think the project was started with a total vision for the area, not just as a profit center and taken from there. I think as far as completing the town, the shops, the restaurants will all be great. Changing the zoning will benefit the town. The absence of a potential gas station, hotel, fast food, and completing it with nice restaurants and stores will all be a great benefit. So please accept my support of the project and the Sarloses. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Urquidez. Mr. Cohen, followed by Bob Field.
Sam Cohen, I work for the San Ynez Band of Chumash Indians. Thank you very much this morning, Chairman Cooney and members of the Planning Commission. I thought I'd start with a brief history of SB 18, although it may get a little on your nerves, because the bill was passed in 2005, and we first initiated it with the San Ynez Valley Community Plan process in September of 2006, and we have used it repeatedly since then. So although I feel sort of like a spoiler today, because the tribe has initiated last Monday their requests for consultations pursuant to SB 18, this has been an issue with the County Planning Office for over 2 years now. All right, and so it's really, I can't take full responsibility for raising this late in the proceeding. There are real architectural issues, all right, involving this site. This entire Los Olivos area is an area of high archaeological significance due to the proximity to Alamo Pintado Creek and a known Chumash cemetery in the area. There were some studies done in 1999 that was done by Fess Parker. There is a huge new footprint for the project, all right? Fess Parker did not contemplate 51,000 square feet, all right? Finally, the only remediation that's listed in this environmental document is called a Phase 3. That's where they go to the archaeological site and they dig it up. All right? Then they catalog the contents. The CEQA guidelines say that is a remedy of last resort. Today, we're just really talking about what is a public benefit. All right? And so we reserve our CEQA comments until a later date. But this is what I've heard. Public toilets are a CEQA benefit, so porta potties would pretty much justify any project. Storm drainage is a public benefit, yet the wastewater treatment plant on this site will generate tons of water, all right, that will be injected into the water table on this site, all right, that will completely offset the storm drainage function. Third, shopping is a public benefit, then 7-Eleven will be pleased. All right, tax revenues are a public benefit. That makes any for-profit commercial business subject to sales tax a public benefit. The only good part of this presentation, at least in the opinion of me and perhaps the tribe, is that this project was actually on a parallel track with Meadowvale in the San Ynez Valley way back in 2004. And if you read the San Ynez Valley Journal last week, all right, you know the tribe has since acquired the Meadowvale site. All right, so the decision you make today on what is the definition, all right, of a public benefit will affect all the future projects in the San Ynez Valley, including those owned by the tribe. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Cohen. Mr. Field, followed by Christopher Parker.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, Bob Field from San Ynez. I'm sorry I got pulled out when I think you said that this will be re-agendized for a discussion of public benefit and renoticed. Is that correct?
No, I haven't suggested that, Mr.
Okay.
Field.
Well,
We have to discuss that, but
then I do
that's
have a
still
comment.
on the table.
Okay, thank you. I do have a comment then. Now, I'm certainly not a Brown Act expert, but I know it does require a brief description of the action to be taken. There's nothing on the agenda that describes a discussion of the public benefit issue here, so I believe legally, although Mr. Allen can tune me up, that there may be a Brown Act issue for taking action on that. Regardless, it has not been adequate. You can't see where it was noticed. And as Mr. Jackson noticed, we have is fussy the right word? Community. And I don't recommend that you hold a discussion of the public benefit without better notice to the community than has been given. And for your own sake, and I think also for the Board of Supervisors, if this goes forward to the board with the community feeling there wasn't adequate notice of this topic, then you're just shipping a hornet's nest off to the Board of Supervisors. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Field. Mr. Parker, he'll be followed by Sam Marmestein.
Morning. Thank you for hearing my comment. My name is Christopher Parker. I work as an analyst for Fess Parker Enterprises. I'm also the director of hotels for Fess Parker Enterprises. Our group are ardent supporters of the project. One of the things that we like the most about it compared to a sort of highway zoning is, frankly, that the project crowns the entry to Los Olivos in a way that isn't fast food or a motel. One of the concerns that I have with the delays that can occur in the process is that if you look at the project as it exists today, it's fairly low density, and with increasing pressure on implements of construction, in the future I fear that a project with this low of a density won't be viable. I know that we look forward and we hope that we look forward to the project, and we hope that it achieves fruition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Mr. Marmerstein, followed by Ed Bowman.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Sam Marmerstein. I'm a resident of Los Olivos. I have a business in Los Olivos called the Los Olivos Wine Merchant Cafe. I've been in the valley here for 12 years. I'm also the president of the Los Olivos Business Organization. So far, the negative comments I've heard from people against the project are from people that don't live in Los Olivos. I'd like to say I did write a letter in support of the project, the Stage Stop project. And the last two paragraphs, I just want to read those. I think you have a copy of the letter. It just says that the Board of Directors of the Los Olivos Business Organization took a vote on whether we support or oppose the Stage Stop Plaza project last month, and the vote was unanimous in support of the project. I think it's important that you know that. The Los Olivos Business Organization does support the Stage Stop project. One of the issues that you've heard a little bit about, which I can't really overemphasize the importance of it, and people make fun of it, but it is very important for Los Olivos, is the public restrooms. And the reason is because all the wine tasting rooms and all the retail stores in Los Olivos, because of being in a special district, cannot let their guests use the restrooms. So there needs to be public restrooms in Los Olivos. And right now, the only public restrooms we have, as people mentioned, are porta potties and a trailer, a portable trailer that is really not designed for the use that it gets in Los Olivos. So Los Olivos Business Organization is the organization that actually pays for this, for the porta potties and the trailer. It's very expensive. It breaks down all the time. We have to pump it twice a week. It's doesn't look good for the town. It's a horrible situation. And if we keep on paying for this portable toilet in Los Olivos, I think the organization is going to be eventually is going to be bankrupt. So having permanent public restroom facilities in Los Olivos, I think, is very important for the town, and will definitely benefit the tourists that come to town and the people that live in Los Olivos, that shop, live there, shop there, work there, and so forth. Excuse me for a second. So anyway, so I think your basic question was, is this project going to be going to benefit the public? And I would say unequivocally, definitely, it will benefit the public. It'll benefit Los Olivos for residents and tourists. Thank you.
Mr. Marmerstein. Commissioner Blau has a question.
Yeah, I just want to know how many people voted in your membership to...
It's not the membership, it's the Board of Governors, the people that actually run the organization.
And how many people in the organization?
There's about, I believe, 75 members in the organization.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
No,
Okay,
not
thank you
now.
for your time.
Thank you for yours. Mr. Bowman, followed by Mark Brooks.
Commissioners, thank you for the time to be able to speak here. I'm a 20-year resident of Los Olivos, along with my wife of 32 years and our 5 children and 3 grandchildren. And Mr. Cooney, I recognize you from the Santa Barbara Dons and the clipboard that you carry out there. It's good to see you again.
You too.
I feel like I'm a fortunate person here, and the fact that my mother's father's father was one of the stagecoach drivers that actually came up over the hill and was able to drink at the location that we see here. My son was also able to ride his go-kart at that location. We also were able at one point to be able to get gas in Los Olivos, which when that disappeared, boy, my son was very upset that he couldn't take and drive his go-kart up to Los Olivos and get his gas. When Fess Parker built his deal, my daughter was very upset that she couldn't take her horse any longer and feed him on the grass that was there. But as time went on, my wife and myself were happy to go up to Fess Parker's place and have a bowl of cereal in the morning and be able to sit together and enjoy it. And now we're so happy to be able to go up to Tom Higgins' place there, where there is no longer gas, and be able to meander through his shop. We walk past that location 3 or 4 times a week, my wife, myself, my children, and quite frankly, it would be nice to see something in that area. that goes along with the community, and I feel that will be one of those things. So, Mr. Sarlos, his family, and the community, I'd like to support it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. Thanks for your time. Mr. Brooks, followed by Mike Brady.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm grateful that you actually narrowed the scope that we talk about today, because 3 minutes would not be enough. I am favorable of this project, and since we're only discussing public benefit, even that is a long list. As it is now today, it is a empty lot. It's been that way. It is the gateway to the town. Public bathrooms in the housing are bringing a combination, as what the Sarloses have proposed, to not use it strictly as a revenue source, but to a combination that would blend nicely into residential, facing residential, and open space, facing the Grand Avenue and these things. But a lot of people already talked about these, and I think I would just be agreeing with them, which I do. The road improvements, which I believe the county will never get to because of the sheer cost and the benefit only benefiting a fairly narrow scope of people, isn't high on anybody's agenda. The drainage issues along Alamo Pintado Avenue, which isn't really a culvert, it's more like a canyon that can almost swallow a car. To see these things improved, which I'm surprised haven't improved just on the liability potentials alone. But probably what I'm most in favorable is the changing of zoning. I can't imagine, I'm a long-term resident, by the way. I moved here in '74, so I spent over 2/3 of my life here. My children graduated from the same high school and had some of the same teachers that chose to teach long enough to have my children. And they plan on living here when they're done with their college. I do not see in San Ynez Valley how C2 benefits our community in any way, shape, or form, especially on that scenic highway. I doubt anybody bringing a C2 project forward to the Planning Commission would get it through, because I don't see fast food or being part of a San Ynez Valley. So, you know, where the biggest obstacle appears to be is getting the C2 to the CH to the C2 zoning. I believe that's a huge community benefit. And I think delaying this project much more than, the potential delays that face this project, which could stretch us out easily for another 3-4 years before construction starts, will probably just curb the desire to even do the project. And I think our next applicant for this site may nowhere be anywhere near as desirable as what this project is. And it may be more about dollars than community benefit. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Mr. Brady is coming up, and while he is, next speaker will be Mr. O'Higgins, Tom O'Higgins.
Thank you. My name's Mike Brady. I've been a Valley resident for a little over 3 decades. I've worked for a number of years in Los Olivos, and I live in Ballard. I've driven, walked, run, I guess you couldn't call it running anymore, more like shuffle, and biked through Los Olivos thousands of times, so I know it very well. And I feel comfortable with a couple things. I won't be redundant here, but I just want to reemphasize, there's one word: bathrooms. What the community of Los Olivos has right now is an embarrassment not only to the community but to the whole county. People that we're inviting in on a daily basis to, as tourists, to come and visit our fine area are thrust into a stinky outhouse, and I think that is an embarrassment. In terms of the general plan, I think overall, the little bit I know about the process, from when the Valley Blueprint Committee first started looking at updating the San Ynez Valley general plan all the way through, there have been controversial aspects to that have basically stalled, delayed, and the process continually. And quite frankly, maybe I'm a negative person, but I see that going on for years and years and years. Because it has gone on for years and years and years. The one thing that has never been controversial within all of those discussions that I'm aware of is changing CH commercial in Los Olivos to C2. I know of additional CH zoned properties further down Alamo Pintado and know the owners of those properties, and all of the general plan proposals, everything has been to change those from CH to C2 because it's logical and it makes sense. And what's proposed here for the town and from a planning perspective makes sense. Just one other quick additional thing, if you go through the town and the community of Los Olivos, you'll see that the transition from residential to commercial is very quick. You can go right across an alley or right from one little building to the next, and you go. And this really integrates into what this design and this plan integrates into really what part of what subtly makes Los Olivos a real interesting place. And so that rezoning to commercial, from commercial to residential also helps our community. So I would appreciate your looking very significantly at going ahead and looking at this property. I don't think you can go back and find that this type of rezone has been controversial in any way.
Thank you, Mr. Beardy. Mr. O'Higgins?
He had to leave, he submitted a letter.
All right, thank you very much. Tom LaPlay, followed by Bobby Martin.
Hi, I'm Tom LaPlay, and I'd like to have the slide 6 that shows the area a little bit bigger, please. I've lived in Santa Ynez Valley since 1976 and been a broker since 1972. I've been involved in real estate in Los Olivos for the last 20 years, and I wanted to point out the slide that has the zoning on it, please. And no, the one with the overlay on the buildings, and it shows the CH and this highway commercial. That'll do. That'll do. I have Coldwell Banker Los Olivos Realty. It's right here. We're contiguous. We're neighbors, and I'm going to first say I'm in favor of this project because, as it's repetitive, it'll help this whole community. This is CH. And that's CH, and this lot over here is CH. This was changed quite a while ago, maybe I think 15 years ago, and and it fits in nicely. This should be changed. I wanted to point out this lot over here, the other side, the west of Maddie's Tavern, had Shell looking at it, to Shell gas station to put in a fast food, and when that came out, a local resident here found out about it, and he bought it. So that wouldn't become a gas station and fast food. That's community input. This, as it is right now, could be, and for financial reason, could be a gas station. We need a gas station, but I don't think that goes with the plan right now, and wouldn't fit into what they're doing. So I'm in favor of this CH zoning, going away and having the C2. Now we've had. I've been involved in properties down here on the corner of Alamo Pintado and Grand Avenue, and they did a wonderful job putting Los Olivos on the map. About 15 years ago to 20 years ago, Jerry Thompson built some beautiful buildings over here. They started building these buildings, Paler, Patalia, and it's turned the whole community around. And now everything else that we see that has been presented, we'll finish it off, especially the bathroom thing, and we will probably see a better economy, especially in real estate, and also for commercial ventures. And then the condominium and higher density is something that we just don't have, and it's highly needed for the community. So I urge you to go ahead with it and not to spend too much time on it, because as you know, when you hold land and you don't develop it, you lose money, and then it goes to the highest bidder, and then they'll do highway commercial, and I don't think that's in your best interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. LaPlante. Bobby Martin, followed by Tish Beltranena.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Bobby Martin. I'm the General Manager of the San Ynez Community Services District, and I'm here on behalf of my board to let you know that we have agreed to operate and maintain the on-site wastewater system for this project. Our operators have been trained in the Septatech system, and they're also certified. The board also sees this as a door that may open in the San Ynez Valley to service some of those special problem areas that's been mentioned here earlier today. This system, I know Mr. Sarlus has representatives here from Septatech that would love to tell you about these awesome systems, but we see it as a way to solve those problems, and that, I think, is the largest benefit to the whole community, not just Los Olivos, but the San Ynez Valley in whole. Restrooms have been mentioned several times. These systems could be used for those kind of restrooms. Our district has met with several business property owners in Los Olivos because they are also interested in one of those systems, and we look forward to working with them some more. I would encourage you to not scare this applicant off. I applaud him for his project and all the public benefits that it does have. So I would encourage you to move this forward as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Beltranena will be followed by Freddie Romero.
Good morning, Commissioners. This morning, I am here not as a paid consultant and not as the land use agent that I usually appear before you as. I am here as someone who's lived in the valley for 25 years and watched the processing very closely. And I urge you to take as much action as you can today. Many times you take actions and say, staff, please bring back the findings to us at the next meeting. And I think that you know what the findings on the public benefit should be on this. They've absolutely been articulated. The housing, the oversizing of all of that infrastructure to take on problems that are not created by this project. Those restrooms in Los Olivos are infamous for breaking down, and then they're not serving the public. No one will go near them. And, you know, just the amount, when you look at the squares, the red squares on this project of all of the public benefit, it's incredible. I've seen people trying to park around the edge of this property and stumbling out into the gopher holes, and you know, for the tourism and the high-end tourism that we promote in this valley, this is a beautiful project. The streetscapes that Mr. Burkus has created here truly reflect the community. They reflect everything I've heard from the community over almost 10 years of the community plan process from blueprint to where we are. It is going to take a long time for that community plan process to go forward. And there's nothing controversial here. You can see by the people who have appeared here that you're not going to have people in here protesting if you support this project. You'll have them in here protesting if you don't, maybe. You know, this is a great project for the community, and it really completes the community. Los Olivos is a beautiful tapestry of a walking community, and it's got a hole in it. And this is like an art restoration. It continues that whole walkable community, and it ties it all together, and it's really beautiful. And I think you can see the support for the project here. And I think that there's a lot of action you can take, and you can say, staff, come back at our very next meeting with the findings of public benefit. And I'm sure that the issues with the Chumash can be worked out over the process. There's still the land use permits and all the other permits to go forward. And there are a lot of hurdles here. But this community wants this project, and it's admirable. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beltranena. Mr. Romero, is Mr. Romero in Santa Barbara?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, Mr. Romero, welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner, Chairman, and fellow commissioners. I'm here on behalf of the San Ynez Band of Chumash Indians Elders Council. I represent them, I work for them, as well as a descendant of the tribe. And I'm here to express their concerns over this development. We're not here to oppose it or to say we're in favor of it. We're here to express how we feel about a couple of the things that we have questioned, and those were the surveys that were done in 98 and 99, the discrepancies between the actual site that was located upon the footprint of this building. And then the following one in 99 that stated that there was no site. For me personally, I usually work at Vandenberg Air Force Base, so I deal with a lot of the federal government laws. The destruction of this site in 99 or prior to 99, I believe there was a tree that was removed. On federal standards, that would be considered an ARPA violation. And there would be consequences for that. While the state and city and local municipalities don't have the same type of federal guideline or regulations or guidelines. So there was a concern there, and also the fact that the footprint is now much larger. There is even a greater concern on behalf of the elders as to what else may be located upon this site. We know that there was testing done, but it was done in specific areas. Given the footprint and that it's going to be much larger, we request that there be additional testing done in other areas of the actual footprint of this site. And today I hear a lot about the preservation and the retaining of the atmosphere of Los Alamos. The question that we have is, what about the cultural history, the history of the first people that were here? People come up here and they talk about how long they've lived here in the community. We go back 10,000 years, and I think for a project such as this, that some consideration should be given to that. As a Native American, I am concerned about the project that is to take place on this land in regards to cultural material. And the fact that SB 18 has now been initiated, hopefully we'll be able to address that, and these problems will be able to be mitigated. So those are the concerns that the elders have, and myself as well. And hopefully we'll be able to come to some type of conclusion or reach some agreement on this. But right now, as it stands, I would ask that no determination would be made as to approval of this project or any further, ongoing construction or groundbreaking at this location because of those reasons. I thank you for listening to me today.
Thank you, Mr. Romero. Micah Brady is next, followed by Curtis Munoz.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Micah Brady. I'm a longtime San Ynez Valley resident and have had an office of one place or another in Los Olivos over the last 9 years. I'm here to offer my support for this project. I think it's of benefit to the valley, to the community. I echo all the positive sentiments in favor of the project that have been outlined to you today. And one thing I think that may not have been said is that all of us not only are here to speak positively in favor of the project, but we're here to support you and know that you have the majority, the vast majority of the community behind you, and implore you to take that into consideration and do the right thing and make sure that this process moves smoothly and quickly and passes positively in the right direction. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Brady. Mr. Munoz, by the way, is the last speaker slip I have. If anyone is out there and wishes to speak, please get us your slip.
Thank you very much. I would echo one of the former speaker's comments, Ms. Beltranini. I am here. This is what I do. You've seen me before your commission before, and I'm doing this because I feel that this is a good project. I would like to stick to the public benefits, and I'll just go down them numerically. One would be the public restrooms. That's a public benefit. 2, the public plaza. 3, an affordable housing component. 4, the introduction of the community services district into Los Olivos to deal with the wastewater and septic issues. The introduction of the special district that specializes in wastewater and septic issues would go a long way in serving the commercial core and dealing with the problems in the wine tasting shops where they can't even wash the glasses because they don't have the ability to dispose of the water. They have to sell those glasses. Item number 5 would be traffic, which would be inclusive of public parking, roadway improvements, as well as pedestrian access. Item 6, storm drainage. Item 7, elimination of undesirable zoning. 8, property tax revenue. 9, sales tax revenue. 10, wages, benefits, salaries to those in the building trades, as well as the people whose jobs will be provided by this development. Those are the quantifiable public benefits. In regards to a prior speaker's comments about the Brown Act notification, I think that by the number of letters that you received and by the number of speakers here, I think it's pretty well documented that the public notice was adequate, as well as the implicit within the item is that the rezone will be discussed, and implicit within that is the fact that a public benefit must be established. So I would say that you wouldn't have an issue on the Brown Act. And I would note also that other speakers who had issues regarding public benefit and the application of taxes and tax revenue toward a public benefit are, let's say, not in a position to speak to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Munoz.
I have a question for Mr. Munoz.
Mr.
Munoz?
Munoz?
Mr. Munoz.
Well, Commissioner Jackson has a question. Thank you.
Yes.
From your vantage point, you've listed a host of public benefits, which are hard not to acknowledge. As you're aware from your vantage point, working with general plan amendments, et cetera, and the environment in which we're in, one of the tasks we'll have before us is to evaluate whether the benefit rises to a definition to essentially absolve it from the community plan process. I was interested to know if you felt that from your vantage point there's a specificity to the benefits over and above a well-designed commercial project that rises to that level to, in a sense, advance the ball before the community plan is adopted.
Thank you for your question, Commissioner Jackson. I would say that in echoing a lot of the previous speakers' comments, when you look at the individual benefits, public restrooms or public plaza or affordable housing as individual components, those in and of themselves may not be enough to raise the bar to the level that you need to have it. But in this case, I think that the sum is greater than the total of the parts, in that there's a certain amount of synergy between the different elements, where when you take all of these different public benefits and put them into one package, that the cumulative benefit outweighs the individual components. And I think that the finding that you can make is clear and easily made. And I would also like staff to perhaps analyze, and you also to consider that within this finding of public benefit, if this is a finding that you're going to make and this is an action you're going to take as far as how it relates to an ability for an aggrieved party to appeal that decision or appeal that determination of public benefit, I'm not sure how procedurally you would go forward on that as a separate item in that if you make that finding, how would somebody appeal that finding prior to your next action, should you take it?
Thank you, Mr. Munoz. All right, thank you everyone for your patience and contributions. We will take a lunch break because I know our discussion is going to be lengthy, as well as we want to have Commissioner Valencia participate. So we'll reconvene at 1:15. Thank you. This is the Santa Barbara County Planning Commission meeting of the 12th of December 2007. And when we broke for lunch, we had heard public comment specifically on the matter of the question of whether this project fits within an exception to the established policy of processing general plan amendments. But the public comment, of course, covered the merits of the project as well. So we're at the point where we need to consider how to go forward, if at all, today. And I want to be sure that staff has an opportunity to provide any input on that. I do have a question for Mr. Allen, but before I get to him, Mr. Tetley, anything to add from your standpoint?
No, not at this time, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Allen, the question I had is was raised by Mr. Field, and that had to do with the restrictions of the Brown Act precluding us from moving forward with a decision of any sort today on the basis of notice, and in particular, not specifically noticing the issue of determination of the substantial public benefit exception. Do you have a thought on that?
Mr. Chair and members of the Commission, I believe this meeting was adequately noticed for purposes of proceeding on the project, including a decision whether or not you wish to recommend the board go forward because of it provides a significant community benefit.
All right, commissioners, any questions of staff before we talk among ourselves as to how to proceed? Commissioner Jackson.
In terms of thinking of questions, I have questions that will frame that ultimately would be framed in the debate we might have under deliberation, but they don't bring to bear on whether or not we should deliberate. The issues that were germane to that. So I'm happy to go ahead and ask or wait until we've had that discussion. Does that make any sense?
As usual, I'm going to interpret what I heard, and certainly we're close to moving to the deliberation stage. I just wanted to be sure there wasn't any information that staff might have that any of the commissioners would like to receive before we did go to that point. And it doesn't appear there is any. So why don't you start out then, Commissioner Jackson, with the questions and discussion.
There's been considerable discussion, and Diane, this question is, I guess, for you, about the zone changes, the C2, the highway, the et cetera, as being inconsistent with current zoning, with being consistent with with the upcoming community plan. And as I read the motion that was made, or the policy statement that was made, was that we would not entertain general plan amendments or zoning changes until the plan was adopted. And much of the discussion focused on the notion of the mixed use, the reduced densities, the reduced parking burdens, et cetera, that would come from this process. My question is, are not those the very subjects that will be a component of the EIR that's being studied within the community plan? Or are those factors that are independent of the process leading to an adoption of the community plan?
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Jackson, I guess I'll interpret your question as well. And I'll answer it kind of in two parts. The first part is, just to be clear again, the project as it's proposed does require both a rezone and a redesignation under the existing plan, land use element. The site is split between CH and C2 zoning and highway commercial and general commercial land use designation. So what they're proposing to do is to redesignate the entire site to general commercial and rezone the entire site to C2, or to be more accurate, half the site, the half that isn't already under that designation in that zone district. So that's what they're proposing to do today. What the community plan is proposing to do as it stands today is to apply a mixed use zoning to the project. The project as it's designed is consistent with both, is my understanding. It's consistent with the proposed zoning over the entire site being C2, and it would also be consistent with the mixed use zone district. That's I think the first kind of implied question. The second part is the community plan, EIR, going to study the redesignation of this site? Yes. It'll study the redesignation of this site and many other sites in the community plan that are also proposed for redesignation and rezone. What we did in the context of the ND is we just studied this site in the project, including the rezone and redesignation of half of the site.
So in effect, this site would be considered in the community plan EIR side by side by other mixed-use commercial properties potentially contemplated or zoned within the community plan boundary?
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Jackson, just to be clear, the community plan will look at other mixed-use sites. It'll also look at other sites that are proposed for redesignation from any number of existing designations to any number of proposed. So it's not just focused on the mixed-use sites. It'll also look at all of the policy issues that are proposed for the community plan, other changes.
That's no.
Mrs. Black also. We have been apprised that technically we have not comported with the SB 18 provision. And what I presume would happen in a consultation is data would be provided or subjects would be discussed that would ultimately be evaluated as part of the process of evaluating the project in the context of a zone change in your consultations. It sounds like at this juncture that subject matter could be germane to what decisions we make. And as a result, we have the cart before the horse on that aspect of this issue. Would that be correct?
Mr. Chair, I'll start, and if County Council wants to augment my response, happy to have him do so. The law provides for consultation with tribes when there is a general plan amendment or a specific plan amendment. So the rezone is not really the applicable trigger. It's the general plan amendment. When a general plan amendment is sought, the local government is to enter into meaningful consultation with affected tribes, and there's a very specific procedure for figuring out which tribes are the affected ones. And I think our position is meaningful consultation requires some communication and discussion about the issues. I don't know whether or not there would be a substantive result. I mean, the archaeological analysis we've done for this project indicates there are no archaeological sites on the property. But the law on consultations goes beyond strictly archaeological sites. It can include cultural and sacred sites, which are harder to identify.
And at this point, we don't know what the substance of their request for consultation is, or whether or not it could be germane to the decision at hand.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Jackson, I would have to agree with respect to this particular site. We don't know because we have not had a conversation yet in the consultation process. We have not had a conversation, so it's hard for me to say whether or not there would be germane issues. We have been undergoing consultation in conjunction with the San Ynez Community Plan process. I believe Mr. Cohen indicated that started last year, sometime in late 2006. I don't know if this particular site has been discussed or whether those discussions have been more general in nature.
Anything to add, Mr. Allen?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, no. Well, yes. The law, as Ms. Black indicated, contemplates meaningful consultation. I will add that no time frame is prescribed for that consultation. It may be that the subject matter of the consultation will be dealt with relatively in a relative abbreviated fashion, or there may be more substantive discussions. We don't know that at this point. But it certainly is my recommendation that you do not proceed to a decision on the project today until an opportunity for consultation has taken place.
Mr. Jackson?
Yeah. And that would seem somewhat logical from the standpoint that we have a date in the future also for a briefing on SB 18 for this group, so that at this juncture I feel somewhat inadequate to evaluating the role of SB 18 on this project, perhaps without that briefing or at least without some substantive discussion on it.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Jackson, I do not think it's necessary for the commission to wait for the briefing on SB 18 in all its aspects. I think what's important in connection with this project is that an opportunity for consultation take place, for meaningful consultation take place before a decision is made by your commission on whether or not to recommend it move forward to the board.
All right, Commissioner Jackson, this project is a 3rd District item, and we're at the point where we need to decide if we're going to go forward with any decision today. I think we have discussed that in view of the consultation obligation without regard to the general plan amendment issue, we are advised not to proceed to a recommendation to the board on the merits of the project. So the remaining question is whether we should indicate whether we're persuaded that the exception to the board's general plan, the policy of the Board of Supervisors, that general plan amendments not be processed while the Santa Ynez Valley Community Plan is working along. So I'm going to suggest that we discuss that issue and see how the commission feels about that, whether we should vote or whether we should go forward by continuing the entire item to an early meeting in 2008. You're first. How would you like to proceed?
I think what I'd like to do is share my concerns with my fellow colleagues and preface the discussion here, because I do have a significant round of concerns. Number one is we had what I can say is an exhaustive debate on whether or not to have the notion of exceptions to for general plan amendments, et cetera, to the general plan when the community plan is waiting to be adopted. I recognize that the timeframes have been aggrandized and that it has taken way too long. However, at the same time, it appears to me that the process, the comprehensive evaluation process that takes place as a component of the adoption of a community plan, deals with mixed-use issues, with commercial rezone and added density issues, traffic issues as they may be produced by projects contemplated within the community plan, are all part of the analysis that will be taking place. This project comes out of that process, and then those projects that remain or are not taken out of the process before adoption are then subject to that process. So the question is whether or not meaningful burdens or cumulative impacts are being avoided, not brought into discussion. So that's a concern for me. Number two, we had two potential applicants, perhaps not as far along in the process, at our preceding meetings, whom we made a decision not to alter the policy and eliminate the special benefits provision. And I believe that I'm concerned about an issue of fairness there. The dialogue today has been about a beneficial project. And my first point is, I like this project. I hope it gets completed. The question, though, is, does it provide a specific benefit that would, or as it was, a significant community benefit that would merit taking this project now as opposed to waiting for adoption of the community plan? And so there's a slightly different standard of benefit that I think we need to discuss there. This project's a good project. They have made extraordinary efforts to be sensitive to this, and I have no denial. These are my neighbors, and I kind of feel as if half my neighborhood showed up today and another half showed up at my preceding meetings to work equally hard to preserve and protect the integrity of the community plan process. And so, again, as I look at the benefits here, they are not small, and I'm prepared to discuss them. But are we creating a standard that is not a significantly high bar for additional projects as we go down? And in that, are we not weakening the integrity of the community plan process when we are, contrary to where I think Mr. Burkus is, we are in the home stretch. We are seeing that an EIR completion date in June has been, I won't say promised, but committed to us, that we've put considerable pressure on comprehensive planning to accelerate this process to make this thing happen. Are we, and I have agonized over the last month about the integrity of a community plan with over $1 million spent and hundreds of community hours, that it get to the finish line, that it do its cumulative assessment, and that it be useful for the next 10 to 20 years. That's a concern for me. I'm not used to this, and I think what I heard staff say is that we have a special problem area identified here, and we have a significant solution posed, and there is considerable technological argument for its efficacy, but we don't have it, the entity that approves that has not approved it. Now, I think what I heard is it's all but approved, so that I can perhaps lift that concern from me, but I need to hear it, because as I think about the neighbors on either side of this process, are we adopting something that we have a good assuredness will go forward? And I think I heard that, but it wasn't as complete perhaps as I might have ferreted it out. So these are the areas where I'm thinking there's the cart's a little bit before the horse here. I want to see this project go through, but I think we need some more time and some more evaluation on some of these issues, at least at this point. And so I am agonizing with the public benefit aspect of this as it establishes that benchmark. And that is where I am seeking this discussion and this deliberation to go from my colleagues. Thank you.
Commissioner Valencia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I go back to the original statement of significant community benefit. And there was a reason why that was put in the statement. I mean, it wasn't that they wanted to stop everything. They said if something has a significant community benefit. And what is a significant community benefit? Well, this project seems to have a lot of things that are significant. One is the public toilets, which they don't have there. We happen to go there quite often, and it is a problem. Two, the storm drains. It is a problem. All the drainage that goes on to all the roads, the dirt road. Three, the affordable units. There'll be 2 affordable units that will be placed on buildings E and F. 4, the paving of the street. One of them is a complete Jonata, or I don't know how you pronounce it, is completely dirt. I mean, with a little gravel on it. That will be paved. Nahoki will get some paving on there, get a 2-inch overlay probably. And Railroad will get repaved again with additional parking spaces. It'll add to the attraction of Los Olivos. So I understand what significant community benefit means. I understand also that the community plan is very important. And if they didn't want, the supervisors, the elected officials, did not want any change, anything to occur prior to the community plan being implemented, they would have not put this statement in there. This statement was put in there for a reason. Now, I don't know if all these things that I mentioned raise to the threshold of significant. That's for us to decide here. That's the big thing. One thing that we do need is, if we're going to make that decision, we probably need to notice the meeting as a meeting to determine significant consistency benefit for the people of Los Olivos or the community. So I think that those are my comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Valencia. Commissioner Blau.
Yeah. I'm going to address this based on 3 or 4 different issues. The first issue for me is the fact that the staff did accept the application some months ago and has been in the process. I've been in processing it. Rightly or wrongly, as an employer, you're responsible for your employees' actions. And they apparently made the determination that this was a significant community benefit, and that's why they allow processing. For that reason alone, I could find that that we should continue to go forward. It would not be appropriate for us as a commission to not recognize that we have the responsibility and have this applicant pay the money and do the work that they were doing
and then stop them at this point in time. It just doesn't seem fair to me to do that. Now, the other issue is obviously, is this a community benefit? And I heard the word public benefit used, quite a few times today. For me, public benefit has a different meaning than community. Public is perhaps more stringent, but at any rate, I can find the use of a clean, safe, sanitary bathroom to be a significant public benefit. I don't want to be having anybody on unsanitary bathrooms. Joe is right, and Commissioner Valencia is right about the other community benefits, the street, the drainage, getting a sewer system that's operating that makes more sense. So I can do all that, all those issues. As far as the issue of Commissioner Jackson's issues with relating to cumulative effects and waiting, the reality is, if you're talking about a lot of little small projects, I can see where those little small projects, we would not want to approve them because they could have a significant cumulative impact. But when we're talking about a significant project like this one, we've done a negative deck, we've addressed all the environmental issues, and it seems to me it's helpful in the community plan to get the bigger projects identified and dealt with, as opposed to trying to deal with those in the community plan. And the example, and Mr. Jackson wasn't here, but that was what the difficulty with Isla Vista, in that it's such a large plan, there's so many pieces to it, that it took this commission forever to go through it. And by the way, we made significant changes to those plans. I will tell you, if I saw the community plan for Santa Ynez, and this was not a part of it, I wouldn't approve it until it got changed and looked like this. So I think we're actually doing ourselves a service by identifying some of the larger projects, dealing with them, and make sure that they are in the community plan when it is approved. And lastly, I'll say, I will address Mr. Valencia's comment about the notice. There is no requirement for us to notice a hearing as to whether or not this is a significant community benefit. The reality is that policy came from the board for the staff enough to deal with. The reality is, if we determined that we want this project approved and it wasn't a significant community plan, we could do that. I mean, we have that authority. It's not what the supervisors instructed us to do, but it's not like it's a requirement for a law or a statute or a regulation. It's just direction from them as to how the staff and how the commission should operate. So I don't think we need to renotice it. And I guess the only real issue here, if you want to attack one, is whether or not this is a community plan. Well, for me, I don't know how you could have any other conclusion, assuming community benefit, excuse me, when we have, by my calculation, somewhere between 20 and 30% of the 1,000 people in Los Olivos come up here and say that it is. And we got 25 letters, every one of them, I think, addressed the issue that this was a significant community improvement, benefit. You've got testimony from 25 people. You've got a vote of 75 people in the Business Owners Association. We're hearing from nobody that this is not a significant community benefit. How we could come to any other conclusion is absolutely beyond me. So I'm prepared to support a motion that would continue this to a relatively short date to allow the Chumash to have their consultation, and I'm kind of looking forward to actually sitting this onto the board with a recommendation to approve it. So those are my comments.
Mr. Chair, I failed to say one comment. Could I just make one short comment? I know you haven't had a chance.
That's all right.
Very small.
I'd rather follow you.
Very small
Please.
comment. Mr. Chair, the fact that we had a project approved 4 years ago, does that have any bearing on this? That it had been, the site had been evaluated for all kinds of cultural impacts and so on, and we had approved a project for the entire site. Does that have any bearing on this?
Ms. Black?
Mr. Chair, I don't think it has a bearing on the decision before you today. We did use a lot of the data that we collected in that review process to review the project, but I don't think it has a bearing on your decision.
Thank you, Commissioner Valencia. Well, Commissioner Jackson, let me say that this, like a lot of projects we seem to have before us lately, is difficult. And in this case, I'm bothered by the process issues, not the substance issues. I didn't hear any testimony today that changed my view coming in, that the project has a lot of merit and on balance would be beneficial for the community of Los Olivos. So if we weren't involved in the midst of a community plan process for the entire San Ynez Valley, I don't think this would be a difficult decision, at least for me. Not only was the team very strong and the presentation of its benefits very clear, but as far as I'm concerned, there would have been opposition from individuals in the community of San Ynez who read the notice that the Stage Stop Plaza was up for review. And so in the absence of any adverse testimony, my conclusion on the substance, based on today's input and the staff report, would be very positive. That's in the nature of a conceptual review, which this literally wasn't, but practically was, because we're precluded from going forward with a recommendation to the board today by the very important issue of consultation that has yet to take place but has been specifically requested. So given the fact that we have to go forward from here with another hearing on this project to be able to make our recommendation to the board, I'm having trouble separating the merits of the substantial community benefit issue from the project itself, because I heard many people come up and testify that the very reason they're supporting the project is because they believe it's a substantial community benefit. And a number of speakers ticked off the reasons, as Commissioner Valencia did, why that's the case. So to me, they're very intertwined. And if we're not prepared today and are really precluded from going forward on a recommendation to the board, I would prefer to defer the decision of whether this is a public benefit until the consultation can be completed. There may be input from the tribe that is valuable to staff in forming its recommendation, reforming its recommendation, modifying the findings and so forth. That would yield more clarity for us in terms of the decision of whether we should act to accept this process, and it is an exception from the board's current policy. One other factor, we know that the issue we had discussed at great length over the past month of whether the board's policy should be adhered to in general, or whether, as our long-range planning staff recommended, we should make exceptions for projects that were consistent with the current state of the plan, is going to the Board of Supervisors for review. And by the time this matter returns to the Planning Commission, it's entirely possible the board may have revisited and revised its policy on exceptions. So for all those reasons, Commissioner Jackson, I would prefer not to reach the decision of whether this project represents an exception to the general policy today, but to defer that until all the information available comes in. That's not to say the hearing hasn't been valuable today and that we're going to immediately forget all of the positive input that came from everybody. I, for one, am very impressed by all of that and will remember it. So I think it's just a matter of how we proceed, and to me, the neater and better solution is to consider all these issues again at an early date, consistent with our obligation to consult with the tribe. And now it's back to you for your concurrence and a motion, if appropriate.
Yeah, none of these issues are easy. I think because it seems like an unfinished process to me, that there are components of the process that need to be addressed, I would like to move that we continue this issue for that very reason, so that there are no doubts when we come to that conclusion.
Do we have a second to that motion? Commissioner Black?
I'll second it, but I have some discussion about it if it's okay. I'm a little bit concerned, and maybe it's just the newness of, for you, Commissioner Jackson, how these projects proceed. I disagree with Chairman Cooney that the tribe is going to have anything that's going to affect whether or not this is a substantial community benefit. I mean, I can't imagine what the tribe would come up with information otherwise that would make any difference there. As far as the other issues that you talk about, unresolved issues, I'm not sure what they could be. I mean, the reality is on the sewer issue or the septic issue, which I think is one you're talking about, I think you need to understand that this particular system has been approved by the county. It does work. We know it works. Now, exactly how it's designed and how it drips and how it functions, that won't get determined for months. It's months after we make our decision to approve this. I mean, you have to have engineer drawings built, but believe me, it's kind of like, we know when we do a perk test on a parcel of ground, and the ground perks that we can put a septic system in. I mean, we don't have to design the septic system before we do that. We don't get a permit for it until late in the process. But I think the things that you're talking about are really very technical issues that we know can be solved. I mean, we know the sewer system will work, but they can't give you the design and the permit today because the guys haven't actually done the physical drawings to make it work. So, I mean, if there were other issues that seem unresolved, I'd be curious to know what those are so that staff could bring them back to us in a timely manner. But I think, based on the staff report and the testimony, we have everything we need to make the decision on even to make the project go forward, albeit we have not technically complied with AB 18, or SB 18. So, I mean, I'm not certain I see the reason to have the applicant wait before we make a determination whether they can continue to process their project. I mean, it either is a substantial community benefit or it's not. And I can't imagine what other information is going to come forward to this commission that would change your thinking. Now, I'm not saying we're going to approve the project today because I can foresee something coming out of the Indian consultation that would cause us to modify the project. That, I think, is possible. Perhaps unlikely, but possible. So I would agree with you that we need to have the report before we make the final recommendation to the board, but I don't see the reason to not decide on the issue of substantial public benefit, or community benefit, excuse me. So those are my thoughts.
All right, we have a motion, and we have a second, and we're in the course of discussion of the motion. Do we, assuming that the motion does pass, do we have a date to suggest? Or do you want to give that some further thought?
Well, I was going to ask Commissioner Jackson if he'd like to reconsider his motion and consider withdrawing it and making a new one to find substantial public benefit, and then we can discuss the motion for the continuance. Now, at worst case, I'm going to agree the continuance, but my preference is that you withdraw it and we find substantial community benefit and then pick a date to finally review the project, get the report from the tribal community, and make a determination then.
Mr. Chair, may I offer an observation, perhaps for the commission and for Commissioner Blatt to consider as well? Even if you make the motion today to find that there's a substantial community benefit implied, it will not be determinative. In other words, you lose your discretion at the next hearing to reconsider that. So in a sense, if you move to continue it, you are moving to hold a further hearing, and you have not really advanced anything by making that motion today. I'm just offering that as a suggestion.
I appreciate that suggestion.
And
go ahead.
So that's one concern that it would be cleaner to do it at a single hearing. Second issue that has concerned me with moving forward with a deliberation of the four of you on that issue right now is that Commissioner Valencia was not here for all of the evidence on that issue. And so it would be preferable perhaps for Commissioner Valencia not to take part in that vote at this moment, whereas he'd certainly have the opportunity to at a future meeting. So I'm just suggesting for a couple of procedural reasons it might be cleaner, and as much as there's going to be a future hearing, it sounds like, to do it, unless there's a vote to not find a significant community benefit, in which case any two of you would carry that vote and the project would be deemed denied. So if somebody wished
Denied
to-
or just deferred until the
project
community-
is before you. The entire project is before you with recommendations, so
All right,
you would be acting on the project.
okay. Commissioner Valencia?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have a question. The portion that I missed was just public testimony, wasn't it? And I had public testimony up to number 14. And how many did you have beyond that?
I'd say we had about 10 to...
10 more? And were there
speakers.
any that were negative other than the type of testimony that was given?
There were two
Two negatives?
that you should hear before, I think you should hear that before you make a decision on the public benefit issue. And you could do it quickly, but as a practical matter here, we want to do the right thing for the applicant and for the community. And we are going to have another session on this. We can, at the commission's desire, we can take it up right at the beginning of the process and determine if we should spend any more time on the project itself. But I really think that to make a decision here, other than perhaps a conceptual support or opposition of the issue, would be a mistake. And I would repeat what I said, and will give everybody a chance to make any additional comments, that I would much prefer deciding all the issues of merit and process at the same time, and to set that as early as our schedule would allow. Commissioner Jackson.
There are three things that have troubled me about this process today. One is that, in theory, this project went forward when the process seemed to raise questions about it. Secondly, we have a process expectation for a tribal consultation that needed to take place that already puts off final decision on this. I do not want to see this project stopped. I do want to see a complete process that respects all of the elements that are in it, and that is why I am sticking with the motion as presented, and I share the comments of the chair in that regard. However, Commissioner Blau, I would want to go to that point of starting at the beginning of the meeting and making that determination whether it will take longer. I would like to see an expedited process. I don't want to add to needlessly add to the time frame, but I do believe these component decisions are elements of a reasonable decision and ought to be a clean process from that standpoint.
Commissioner Blau.
You know, for the benefit of the applicant, I probably should ask him the question. I mean, the reality is that if we took an action today and denied your project, you could make an immediate appeal to the board, and that may be the shortest way you get there. I'm not really too sure. I'm not sure that what you're proposing kind of makes sense to me. I mean, if you're telling me that at the first of the meeting that we're going to postpone this to, we're going to make the determination as to whether it's community public benefit, I mean, we're not taking any testimony, we're not getting any more information. What's the difference between making a decision at the end of this meeting or the beginning of that meeting? I'd like these people to know that we're either going to continue to process our project, may not get approved, looks like it will, but that's not going to be determined today, but at least let them know as to whether or not we're going to allow the staff to process things so we can make a decision up or down the merits of the project. So you know, I'm half inclined to take a little recess here and go find out from the applicant whether or not they want us to continue this and deal with it as a commission, or deny it and let them get to the Board of Supervisors for their determination.
That's a reasonable suggestion, Commissioner Blau. I would just say, in response to how I envision the process occurring at the next meeting, it would not be void of additional input. On the contrary, we would have the results of consultation. And though you doubt anything would come of that that would make a difference, we would hear from staff as to that. We would hear from staff as to any other aspects pertaining to the issue of the exception to the board's policy, including the board's action on that matter. And finally, we would have Commissioner Valencia and perhaps as well Commissioner Brown in a position to join the decision. So I think there are real benefits to putting the entire package at the beginning of the meeting whenever it's continued to. Now, if the applicant would prefer that we move ahead with a vote on the limited basis of the information we have today and with the handicaps we have, I'm certainly going to listen to that. I don't think it's going to change my mind in preferring a continuance.
And could I, if I could I just ask, do we have a date certain for the board addressing the issue that we put before, that we moved on a couple weeks ago?
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Blau, I'm not aware that that item has been set yet, but I'm under the impression it will be set for January 22nd.
So we could have our hearing January 23rd, and we would know that decision from the board, am I correct?
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Blau, assuming that it moves forward and is set for that day, and the board takes action, yes.
Okay.
Well, Commissioner Blau, I don't see the board's action as essential to our decision. I think it might be useful if they decide, for example, to change their policy. But they may not, in which case we're still going to be faced with the same issue. We just know that. So if they don't take action by the 22nd, we could still move forward as soon as possible thereafter. The problem is the 23rd meeting is in Santa Barbara, is it not?
Mr. Chair, yes, the 23rd is in Santa Barbara, so, and it's a bit full, but there are two non-permit items on that day. There's also the hearing on February 13th, which is up here.
And we have some time on that agenda.
Yeah, can we take a little break here?
Commissioner Blau would like to consult with the applicant, so let's just take a 5-minute recess and we'll come back on the record and make a decision. Santa Barbara County Planning Commission meeting of December 12, 2007, and we interrupted our deliberations in order to consult with the applicant regarding the motion for a continuance, which was originally seconded, I believe, by Commissioner Blau, but with comment and subsequent discussion. Are you still willing to second the motion to continue the matter?
Yeah, so the 23rd.
23rd of January?
Of January. Mm-hmm.
All right. So that's the motion. It is to continue the matter from this point to the 23rd of January. That meeting will be in Santa Barbara. And is there any further discussion?
If I may, Mr. Chair, I'd like to share one observation, is that if a consultation is part of your process, and we're going to begin by dismissing the value of what they might say, you are not respecting the process. And they made comments which may have been valuable or not valuable. But again, for me, this has always revolved around a process issue, complete information to make a complete decision. Therefore, I stay with the motion I made.
Ms. Oplin, we're ready for the roll call.
Commissioner Blau?
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson?
Yes.
Commissioner Valencia?
Aye.
Commissioner Cooney?
Aye.
Vote carries 4-0.
Mr.
All right.
Chair,
Mr. Allen.
I'd just like to note for the record that the consultation that took place during the break was solely one commissioner meeting with representatives of the applicant.
Correct. All right, this concludes the business of the Santa Barbara County Planning Commission for the year 2007. Thank you all.
Mr. Chair, before you complete, I'd like to say that thank you very much for being our chairman. You did an outstanding job. You were always very generous in allowing us to speak, and I think you've done an outstanding job. I know that we're going to miss you as chairman, but we're going to enjoy you as a commissioner.
And I want to second that, Joe. I think he's done a fabulous job as chair.
Thank you both. Thank you all very much. It's been a real pleasure, and we look forward to another challenging year ahead, and I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday break. I know some of you have more to do between now and the holidays than others, but we'll all get through it in good health and happiness. Thank you all.